Number 1. Sean Patrick Grayson. On the early morning of the 6th of July 2024, at approximately 1 a.m., deputies from the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office responded to a 911 call from Sonia Lene Wilburn Massey, aged 36, who had reported a possible prowler at her residence in Woodside Township. Deputies entered the home to investigate. Sonia Massey was in her kitchen. She began searching for identification as requested. At one point, she lifted a pot of boiling water from the stove. Officer Sean Patrick Grayson, accompanied by another deputy, ordered her to drop the pot, shouting repeatedly. As she moved, he drew his service weapon and aimed it at her face. According to prosecutors, he yelled, "Drop the pot," and threatened to shoot her in the face. Massey replied, "I'm sorry," ducked, and lowered her hands, but Grayson then fired 3 shots. She was struck in the head and died from her injuries. The other deputy on scene sought to render aid, but Grayson allegedly discouraged him, stating, "That's a headshot." The partner continued attempts to assist until paramedics arrived. The body camera footage from the other deputy showed that Massey was unarmed and retreating when shot. Massey had earlier been experiencing a mental health crisis, as discussed in records and family statements. Following the shooting, Grayson was immediately terminated from his position as deputy. Sean Patrick Grayson was 30 years old at the time of the incident. He had worked in multiple law enforcement roles across central Illinois in the years prior, holding positions as part-time and full-time officer or deputy in several counties. Before entering law enforcement, he had served in the United States Army, from which he was discharged in 2016 for misconduct. He was taken into custody and held without bond. A grand jury later indicted him on multiple counts: 3 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of aggravated battery with a firearm, and 1 count of official misconduct. Grayson pleaded not guilty to all charges. The Supreme Court also declined to grant release while considering whether to hear the appeal. Grayson's attorneys have noted that he is battling stage 3 colon cancer, which he was diagnosed with in late 2023, and that he is undergoing treatment. The family of Sonia Massey retained prominent civil rights counsel. They demanded transparency, release of video evidence, and accountability. As of August 2025, Sean Patrick Grayson remains in custody without bond, held at the Macon County Jail. Number 2. Jason Van Dyke. Jason Van Dyke was 37 years old at the time of the shooting. He had served as a patrol officer with the Chicago Police Department for about 13 years. On the 20th of October 2014, Officer Van Dyke and his partner responded to a call about a person breaking into vehicles near West 41st Street and Pulaski Road. When they arrived, they encountered Laquan McDonald, a 17-year-old teenager carrying a small knife. The officers exited their vehicle. McDonald was walking down the street, away from them. In rapid succession, Van Dyke drew his service weapon and fired 16 rounds at McDonald, many of them striking him from behind as he fell to the ground. The dash camera installed on Van Dyke's patrol car captured the shooting. Before the release of that video, city and police narratives suggested McDonald might have lunged at officers. After release, the visual record contradicted that claim. McDonald was pronounced dead at a hospital. In the days following, Van Dyke was placed on administrative leave. The Chicago Police Department and the Cook County State's Attorney's Office launched investigations. In November 2015, Van Dyke was formally charged with first-degree murder and 6 counts of official misconduct, as well as 16 counts of aggravated battery, 1 for each bullet fired. On the 5th of October 2018, the jury reached a verdict. Following the verdict, Van Dyke was formally discharged from the Chicago Police Department, and his badge was revoked. At sentencing on the 18th of January 2019, the court imposed a prison term of 81 months, 6 years and 9 months. Judge Vincent Gaughan sentenced only on the murder count. citing that the battery counts were automatically merged. While serving his sentence, Van Dyke was initially transferred to a federal facility in Danbury, Connecticut. He was reportedly attacked by other inmates, prompting further moves. He was later housed at FCI Otisville in New York and then moved to a state facility in Maryland before eventually being returned to Illinois. In early 2022, Van Dyke was released after serving roughly 39 months, about 3 years and 3 months, because of Illinois' rules permitting day-for-day credit for good behavior. Number 3. Peter Liang. Peter Liang was a rookie officer at the time of the incident. He was 27 years old and had graduated from the police academy less than 2 years earlier. Born and raised in Queens to Chinese immigrant parents, Liang pursued a career in law enforcement in hopes of achieving stability and public service. By November 2014, he was still on probationary status, working late-night shifts and undergoing routine training patrols with a partner. On the night of November 20th, Liang and his partner, Officer Sean Landau, were conducting what was described as a vertical patrol of the Louis H. Pink Houses, a public housing complex in the East New York section of Brooklyn. These patrols, sometimes called verticals, involved officers walking stairwells and hallways in search of suspicious activity or residents violating housing rules. At approximately 11 p.m., Liang entered a darkened stairwell on the 8th floor with his firearm drawn. As he opened the door with his left hand and his service weapon in his right, the firearm discharged. The bullet ricocheted off a concrete wall and struck Gurley, a 28-year-old who had just entered the stairwell 1 floor below with his girlfriend, Melissa Butler. Gurley, who was unarmed, stumbled down several flights of stairs before collapsing. Butler ran to seek help, but Gurley was later pronounced dead at Brookdale Hospital. After the discharge, Liang initially failed to render aid or call for medical assistance. Testimony later revealed that both Liang and Landau debated what to do before eventually radioing the incident. Liang later admitted he had been startled when the weapon fired and that he had not intended to shoot anyone. Gurley, who had been visiting the building to see a relative, had no involvement with crime that night and was considered a completely innocent bystander. The case immediately drew attention from both the community and the broader public. The shooting occurred only weeks after the deaths of Michael Brown in Ferguson and Eric Garner on Staten Island, events that had already heightened tensions over police accountability. Gurley's death was widely described as emblematic of reckless police practices and insufficient training. In February 2015, a grand jury in Brooklyn indicted Liang on charges of second-degree manslaughter, criminally negligent homicide, official misconduct, and reckless endangerment. Liang pleaded not guilty, maintaining that the shooting was accidental and that he panicked in the aftermath. On February 11, 2016, the jury returned a guilty verdict on the counts of second-degree manslaughter and official misconduct. Liang was acquitted on the counts of reckless endangerment and criminally negligent homicide. Facing a maximum sentence of 15 years, Liang instead received 5 years of probation and 800 hours of community service. Justice Chun cited Liang's lack of intent to kill, his immediate emotional breakdown after the shooting, and the accidental nature of the discharge as factors in reducing the punishment. Liang was immediately discharged following the conviction. Number 4. James Ashby. On the evening of October 19, 2014, Ashby was on duty when he encountered 27-year-old Jack Jaquez in Rocky Ford. Jaquez was a local resident, known to friends and family as a quiet and artistic man. He lived with his mother, Viola Jaquez, and his girlfriend. On that night, Jaquez had been playing video games with friends and returned home around midnight. Ashby followed him into the residence without a warrant. According to testimony later presented in court, Ashby claimed he believed Jaquez had entered the house unlawfully, though in fact Jaquez was entering his own home. Inside, Ashby confronted Jaquez. Viola Jaquez, awakened by the noise, witnessed parts of the encounter. Ashby drew his service weapon and shot Jaquez once in the back. The bullet traveled through his body, causing fatal injuries. Jaquez collapsed in his home and later died from the gunshot wound. His mother immediately called for help, but it was too late to save her son. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation and the District Attorney's Office reviewed the case. Within weeks, Ashby was charged with second-degree murder and first-degree official misconduct. The investigation found no justification for the use of deadly force, as Jaquez had posed no threat to Ashby or others in the home. In November 2014, Ashby was arrested and booked. He was placed on administrative leave and later dismissed from the Rocky Ford Police Department. On June 20, 2016, the jury found Ashby guilty of second-degree murder, and the court imposed a 16-year prison sentence, which was within Colorado's statutory range for second-degree murder. Number 5. Christopher R. Walrath. On the 9th of December 2024, inmate Robert L. Brooks, aged 43, was transferred from Mohawk Correctional Facility to Marcy Correctional Facility. Shortly after his arrival, correction officers assaulted Brooks. Video footage from passively recording body cameras captured officers beating Brooks while his hands were cuffed behind his back on a medical examination table. The footage shows officers striking him, hoisting him by his neck, dropping him face down, and stomping on him with a shoe. Brooks was struck multiple times, including in the groin region. He was placed in a chokehold and endured repeated blows before being left unresponsive. He was transported to the hospital, where he died the following day, December 10, from neck compression and blunt force trauma injuries. Following the beating, investigators from the New York State Attorney General's office and a special prosecutor in Onondaga County launched inquiries. Walrath was one of 6 correctional officers indicted on charges of second-degree murder and first-degree manslaughter. While others remained under investigation or trial, Walrath opted to enter a plea. On the 5th of May 2025, Walrath pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter in Oneida County Court in Utica. As part of his allocution, he admitted that he, along with other officers, participated in the assault on Brooks, that he placed him in a chokehold, struck him in the body and groin, and lied to investigators about the events. He also admitted that he left his assigned post to join the assault. Walrath was sentenced on the 4th of August 2025 to 15 years in prison. In addition to incarceration, the plea agreement included 5 years of post-release supervision. Number 6. Grant Hardin. Grant Hardin was 52 years old when he shot and murdered James Appleton in Benton County, Arkansas. He had worked for decades in various law enforcement roles, serving as a police officer in multiple cities, as a constable in Benton County, and briefly as police chief of Gateway, Arkansas. His relationships with other officers had been fraught. He had been fired from some agencies for misconduct. On the evening of the 23rd of February 2017, James Appleton, aged 59, an employee of the Gateway Water Department and the brother-in-law of Gateway's mayor, was parked in his truck and speaking on the phone. At that moment, Hardin approached in a white sedan, pulled alongside, and fired a single bullet through Appleton's window. Appleton was struck in the head and died in his vehicle. Witness John Bray, driving past shortly after the shot, heard the gunfire and observed Appleton's truck before calling emergency responders. Investigators later found blood swabs on the hood of Hardin's vehicle. Within hours, he called his wife and daughter that evening and told them something had gone wrong. Law enforcement quickly traced the shooter's vehicle to Hardin, and he was arrested for the murder. His firearm and car yielded forensic matches. In October 2017, Hardin pleaded guilty to first-degree murder as part of a plea agreement. Prosecutors dropped a capital murder charge in exchange. He told the court that he was sorry and acknowledged the seriousness of his actions, though he did not articulate a clear motive. The judge sentenced him to 30 years in prison with 10 years suspended. In subsequent years, more of Hardin's past misconduct came to light. In 2019, law enforcement matched his DNA to a 1,997 assault of an elementary school teacher in Rogers, Arkansas. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts of abuse and was sentenced to 50 years, 25 years per count, to be served consecutively to his murder sentence. His total term thus became effectively 80 years. Hardin sought appeals and requested sentence adjustments under newer statutes, but courts upheld his convictions and terms. In May 2025, Hardin escaped from the North Central Unit in Calico Rock. He disguised himself in a makeshift law enforcement uniform, impersonated a corrections officer, and walked through a secure gate after another officer opened it. He eluded capture for nearly 2 weeks, prompting a large manhunt involving drones, canine units, and local, state, and federal agencies. He was recaptured about 1.5 miles from the prison in Izard County. He was charged with second-degree escape and transferred to Varner Supermax Prison. As of August 2025, Grant Hardin has served more than 8 years of his combined sentences. Number 7. Richard Fatherly. Richard Fatherly was 32 years old at the time of the incident. He had been serving for about 1 year and 4 months in a role at the Wyandotte County Sheriff's Office, specifically assigned to the detention center, handling the movement of inmates and court detainees. He was not a state-certified law enforcement officer, but held a detention staff role. On the 5th of July 2025, the county jail's infirmary processed inmate Charles Adair, aged 50, who had been arrested the prior day on misdemeanor failure to appear traffic warrants. Adair had a pre-existing wound on his left leg and was undergoing care in the infirmary in the evening. At approximately 8 p.m., guards wheeled Adair from the infirmary toward his cell. As they attempted to move him, officers encountered difficulty. A struggle unfolded while removing Adair from the wheelchair and escorting him into the cell. In that course, multiple deputies, including Fatherly, were involved. According to the coroner's report, one officer knelt on Adair's back for 1.5 minutes, while other deputies removed his handcuffs and guided him to a lower bunk. Adair was left lying face down. By 8:37 p.m., he was observed to be unresponsive. He was later pronounced dead. The autopsy showed multiple rib fractures, a sternal fracture, muscle hemorrhage in the back and shoulders, and signs consistent with mechanical asphyxia. Underlying cardiovascular disease and cirrhosis were contributing conditions. The death was classified as a homicide. After that evening, the county and the Kansas Bureau of Investigation initiated an inquiry. Fatherly was placed on unpaid administrative leave. He was issued a criminal summons rather than being arrested, a step unusual in homicide-level charges, but defended by the district attorney as permissible when a defendant is cooperative and not considered a flight risk. Because the case is still in its initial phases, there are no recorded years served in prison yet. Number 8. Amber Renee Geiger. On the evening of September 6, 2018, in Dallas, Texas, Amber Renee Geiger, then a 30-year-old off-duty police officer with the Dallas Police Department, returned home after completing a long shift. Instead of entering her own apartment, she mistakenly walked into the unit directly above hers, believing it to be her residence. Inside that apartment was Botham Shem John, a 26-year-old man originally from Street Lucia who worked as an accountant and was known for his church involvement and warm personality. The encounter that followed would end in Jean's death and bring Geiger to trial for murder. Amber Geiger had served the Dallas Police Department for about 4 years by the time of the incident. She was assigned to the crime response team and had no prior major disciplinary actions on record. Botham Jean had been living in Dallas while working for PricewaterhouseCoopers. Friends and co-workers described him as ambitious, deeply faithful, and generous. He had invited neighbors and church friends to his home often, and his apartment was considered a place of welcome. On that evening, Geiger parked her vehicle in the complex garage and mistakenly parked on the wrong floor. She entered the fourth-floor hallway and walked toward what she thought was her own apartment. The door to Jean's apartment was not fully latched, and when she pushed her key fob against it, the door opened. Believing an intruder was inside her home, Geiger drew her service weapon, a Glock 9mm pistol. Inside, Jean was sitting in his living room, reportedly eating ice cream. Geiger later stated she issued verbal commands for him to show his hands, though Jean did not appear to understand the situation. Within moments, she fired 2 shots, one of which struck Jean in the chest. He fell to the floor, fatally wounded. Emergency responders transported him to Baylor University Medical Center, where he was pronounced dead. The Dallas Police Department quickly launched an investigation, but the case was transferred to the Texas Rangers to avoid a conflict of interest. Geiger was placed on administrative leave immediately. Days later, she was arrested and charged with manslaughter. The charge was later upgraded to murder, following further review of the circumstances. On October 1, 2019, the jury found Amber Geiger guilty of murder and she was sentenced to 10 years in prison. After sentencing, Geiger showed visible emotion, breaking down in tears and expressing remorse. She stated that she wished she could take back her actions and that she lived every day with the pain of knowing her mistake took a life. As of August 2025, Amber Renee Geiger has served nearly 6 years of her 10-year prison sentence at the Mountain View Unit. Number 9. Brandon Cole Dingman. In the late evening hours of the 4th of July 2019, police in Wilson received a 911 call reporting a naked man screaming and running down the street. The man, later identified as Jared Lakey, age 28, was found by Officer Joshua Taylor, who arrived first. Approximately 3 minutes after Taylor's arrival, Officer Brandon Dingman arrived on scene. The 2 officers approached Lakey, who was acting confused and disoriented. According to reports and later trial evidence, Lakey did not comply with commands to stop or place his hands behind his back. Officer Dingman and Officer Taylor deployed tasers against Lakey repeatedly. Body and dash camera footage, as well as testimony at trial, revealed that Dingman and Taylor used their tasers on Lakey dozens of times, 53 times in total, according to later disclosure. At times, the officers claimed Lakey had ripped the taser barbs out of his skin, which they said reduced effectiveness. Backup was called, and Deputy David Duggan eventually applied a vascular neck restraint on Lakey while other officers placed handcuffs. Lakey was seated, unclothed and unarmed, during large portions of the restraint. After being restrained, medics were requested and attempted resuscitation. Jared Lakey was transported to a hospital, where he died of cardiac arrest 3 days later, on the 6th of July 2019. The medical examiner cited complications from myocardial infarction in the setting of cardiomegaly and coronary atherosclerosis, in conjunction with the law enforcement use of a conducted electrical weapon and restraint. Shortly after the incident, Dingman was placed on administrative leave and suspended from duty. He was 32 years old at the time of the incident. He was an officer with the Wilson Police Department in Oklahoma, having served in that capacity for several years. He had previously held a standard law enforcement position with routine street patrol and call response duties. The Wilson Police Department removed him from active service permanently. In November 2021, Dingman and Taylor were tried in Carter County. After deliberation lasting just over 5 hours, the jury found Dingman guilty of second-degree murder and recommended a 10-year prison sentence. As of August 2025, Brandon C. Dingman has served approximately 3 years and 9 months of his 10-year sentence. Number 10. Michael Harold Chappell. Michael Harold Chappell was a deputy sheriff in Forsyth County, Georgia, in the early 1990s. He was in his mid-30s at the time of the crime and had worked in law enforcement for several years. His reputation within the sheriff's department was mixed. Some colleagues described him as a capable officer, while others noted that he faced scrutiny for questionable conduct and involvement with individuals known to be linked to criminal activity. His personal life was also troubled, with financial pressures and strained relationships forming the background to the events that unfolded. On April 15, 1993, a woman named Emma Jean Thompson was reported missing. She was a local resident known to Chappell and was said to have been involved in personal disputes connected to him. Later that day, her car was discovered abandoned on the side of the road in Forsyth County. Inside, there were signs of foul play. Several days later, her body was discovered in Dawson Forest, a wooded area in neighboring Dawson County. The victim had been shot multiple times at close range. Evidence pointed toward a deliberate act rather than a random assault. Investigators quickly turned their attention to Michael Chappell. Witnesses later reported that Thompson had been seen with Chappell on the day she disappeared. There were also allegations that Chappell had previously borrowed money from her and that there had been tension between them regarding repayment. According to prosecutors, this financial dispute provided the motive. Ballistic evidence linked a firearm in Chappell's possession to the shooting, and fibers found in his patrol car were consistent with material from Thompson's clothing. Chappell was arrested and charged with malice murder, felony murder, and related offenses. His trial began in 1995 and drew significant attention due to his position as a law enforcement officer. The prosecution argued that he had abused his authority and uniform to lure Thompson into a vulnerable situation, then killed her to prevent her from exposing his financial dealings and to silence her. He was convicted of murder and sentenced to death. He has been on death row for more than 30 years in prison. Number 11. Stephen Mark Zelich. Stephen Mark Zelich was about 51 years old during the time of his first homicide in August 2012. He had previously served as a police officer for the city of West Allis, Wisconsin, from February 1989 until his resignation in August 2001. After an internal investigation found he had stalked women during duty and misused departmental records to access their personal information. After leaving the force, he worked in private security and maintained a previous clean criminal record until his arrest. In August of 2012, Zelich lured 19-year-old Jenny Gamez from Oregon through an online sadomasochism or breath play website under his alias Mr. Handcuffs. He arranged to meet her at a hotel in Kenosha County, Wisconsin. Over the course of their encounter, Zelich claimed that he applied choking pressure to her neck, intending erotic breath control, but that he lost control and caused her death. Afterward, he transported her body to his apartment in West Allis, placed it in a suitcase, and stored it in his refrigerator for an extended period. In November 2013, Zelich met 37-year-old Laura Simonson online under similar circumstances. He arranged to meet her in Rochester, Minnesota, at a hotel. Zelich asserted that during sexual bondage or breath control play, he inadvertently choked her to death. He then transported her body across state lines to Wisconsin, placing her in a suitcase and storing her in his vehicle or home until he disposed of both suitcases along a rural road in Walworth County, Wisconsin. In June 2014, highway workers discovered the suitcases and alerted authorities. Following the discovery, investigators collected forensic evidence from the suitcases, interior bindings, rope knots, and the remains. DNA from rope knots matched Zelich. He was arrested on the 25th of June 2014. He waived many objections at the time, cooperated in part with interviewers, and admitted that both women had died during erotic breath play that became fatal, and that he concealed their bodies in suitcases. He maintained that both deaths were accidental rather than intentional murders. In January 2016, Zelich entered a plea in Kenosha County to first-degree reckless homicide for the death of Jenny Gamez and to charges of hiding a corpse. On the 30th of March 2016, he was sentenced to 35 years in prison, plus 10 years of extended supervision, with concurrent 3-year terms for hiding the corpse charges, giving credit for days already served. In February 2017, Zelich pleaded guilty in Minnesota to second-degree murder for Simonson's death and received a 25-year sentence to be served after his Wisconsin term. Later in October 2017, he also received a 10-year sentence for hiding corpses in the Walworth County case. As of August 2025, Stephen Mark Zelich remains incarcerated, having served approximately 8 to 9 years of his 70-year term. Number 12. Lori Bembenek. Lori Marie Bembenek was 22 years old at the time of the crime. She was born and raised in Milwaukee, and had worked briefly as a police officer with the Milwaukee Police Department. Her tenure as an officer was short and troubled, marked by disciplinary issues and eventual dismissal. Following her separation from the force, she married Frederick Schultz, a Milwaukee police detective. Schultz was recently divorced, and his former wife, Christine Schultz, retained custody of their 2 young sons. This relationship became strained almost immediately, with financial disputes, jealousy, and allegations of misconduct adding tension. On the night of May 28, 1981, Christine Schultz was at her home on Milwaukee's South Side. In the house with her were her 2 young sons. At some point in the late evening, an intruder entered the residence. Evidence later presented at trial suggested that the assailant bound Christine Schultz with rope and gagged her with a bandana. She was then shot in the back of the head at close range with a firearm while lying face down on her bed. One of her children, a son named Sean, managed to free himself from bindings and ran to a neighbor's house, reporting the presence of an intruder. The other son, Shannon, also confirmed seeing a man with a ponytail leaving the house, though his description would later be debated. The police investigation quickly focused on Lori Bembenek, who by then was living with Frederick Schultz. Investigators alleged that she had a motive tied to resentment toward Christine Schultz, particularly around financial obligations Frederick continued to have toward his former wife. They also pointed to circumstantial evidence including hair found at the crime scene, fibers matching a wig, and ballistics connected to a pistol that Frederick Schultz owned but had reported stolen. The case narrative presented was that Lori Bembenek had disguised herself with a wig, entered Christine's home, bound her, and carried out the killing. Lori Bembenek was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life imprisonment. Following the conviction, her employment history with the Milwaukee Police Department was officially terminated, and she was permanently discharged from any police role. At sentencing, Lori Bembenek appeared composed. She maintained her innocence and continued to state that she was being framed. She expressed little outward reaction beyond formally acknowledging her appeal intentions. Over time, her side of the story became widely publicized. She claimed that evidence had been planted, that her trial was unfair, and that the Milwaukee Police Department had orchestrated her downfall because she had previously spoken out against corruption and misconduct. Bembenek's imprisonment was marked by a highly publicized escape. In July 1990, after serving approximately 8 years, she escaped from Techita Correctional Institution with the help of her fiancé, Dominic Gugliotto. The two fled to Thunder Bay, Ontario, Canada, where they lived under assumed identities for 3 months before being captured. She was extradited back to Wisconsin, and the incident brought renewed attention to her case. The escape added to her notoriety and the public fascination, often referred to as "Run, Bambi Run," a nickname she gained during her trial. After her return to custody, her legal team continued to pursue appeals. She was released from prison and placed on parole. After a while, she was diagnosed with liver and kidney disease, and in her later years, her health deteriorated. She died on November 20th, 2010, in Portland, Oregon, at the age of 52. Number 13. Liddell Emery Hannon. Liddell Emery Hannon was 31 years old at the time of the explosion. He was a police officer employed by the Hazleton Police Department, though suspended during the period of investigation. Before that, he had a clean criminal record and had served in the U.S. military. His estranged marital situation and disputes over custody and relationship with his former spouse had grown acrimonious. On the morning of the 21st of December 2021, at approximately 7 a.m., Hannon is accused of placing an improvised explosive device near the home of Harrison Jordan in Calairs, in Klein Township. Jordan was in a relationship with Hannon's estranged wife. As Jordan left his apartment to begin his workday, he saw a small device constructed within a metal bucket, with a fuse burning outside the doorway. He attempted to retreat back into the building. At that moment, the explosive detonated, causing serious injury. Jordan sustained damage to his eardrums, lacerations to the back of his head, shrapnel wounds to his leg, and impact injuries to his face. Others in nearby residences also felt the blast and reported hearing a loud boom, windows rattling, and smoke. 2 men were injured by the explosion, though Jordan was the primary target. Investigators responding to the incident secured the surrounding area, collected fragments of the device, took photos of blast patterns, and interviewed neighbors who reported seeing a white sedan speeding away shortly before the explosion. Authorities traced that white sedan to Hannon's Honda Accord. When questioned, Hannon initially denied involvement, claiming he had driven his daughter to school that morning. Troopers reported that license plate readers had captured his vehicle traveling toward Klein Township in the early morning hours, contrary to his claim. They later obtained a search warrant for his estranged wife's car and discovered GPS tracking devices inside and outside it, which indicated he had monitored her movements. They concluded that Hannon had stalked both his estranged wife and Jordan over time. On the 15th of February 2022, Hannon was formally charged in Schuylkill County with attempted homicide, aggravated assault, possession of a weapon of mass destruction, stalking, arson, causing a catastrophe, criminal mischief, reckless endangerment, and related counts. He was suspended without pay from the Hazleton Police Department. The charges allege that he planned and executed the bombing as retaliation and with the intent to murder or seriously injure Jordan. Pre-trial, Hannon's defense contested the evidence connecting him to the scene. He denied manufacturing or detonating the device, arguing that the physical evidence was circumstantial and that gaps existed in chain of custody. His attorneys also argued that the GPS and tracking evidence were improperly obtained or insufficient to prove intent beyond a reasonable doubt. Prosecutors countered that the planning, surveillance, and matching of his vehicle to the time frame evinced premeditation. Jordan described enduring hearing loss, persistent shrapnel in his body, and daily trauma from the blast. After deliberation, the jury found Hannon guilty on multiple counts, and he was sentenced to 17½ to 35 years in a state correctional facility. Number 14. Drew Walter Peterson. Drew Walter Peterson was 50 years old when the death of his third wife, Kathleen Savio, occurred. He had served many years as a Bolingbrook, Illinois, police sergeant, rising through the ranks in a suburban department. He was married 4 times, father to 6 children, and had cultivated a degree of local prominence. By the early 2000s, his personal life was in chaos. his marriage to Savio was dissolving, and he had begun a relationship with his fourth wife, Stacy Cales. On the evening of the 29th of February 2004, Peterson attempted to return his sons from a visitation weekend to Savio's house, but was unable to reach her. The following evening, after enlisting the help of a locksmith and some neighbors, Peterson entered Savio's home. Inside, bystanders and investigators later found Savio's body lying face down in her bathtub, hair soaked with blood, and a laceration to her scalp. The initial coroner's determination was accidental drowning. Under that ruling, responsibility was not assigned criminally. In October 2007, Stacy petitioned police, reporting she was missing. Her disappearance attracted media and law enforcement attention, prompting a re-examination of Savio's death. Later that year, Savio's remains were exhumed, and new forensic analysis found evidence of a struggle and injuries inconsistent with a simple fall or accident. In May 2009, a grand jury indicted Peterson for the first-degree murder of Kathleen Savio. Authorities asserted that Peterson had motive, means, and opportunity, and that the forensic evidence supported homicide rather than accident. On the 21st of February 2013, he was sentenced to 38 years in prison. As of August 2025, Drew Peterson remains incarcerated, having served approximately 12 years of his total combined sentences, 38 years plus 40 years. Number 15. Dennis Lynn Rader. Dennis Lynn Rader was born and raised in Kansas, and grew up in what seemed to be a conventional family setting. He later served in the United States Air Force, and upon returning to Kansas worked in a number of jobs before settling in Park City, a suburb of Wichita. In the mid-1970s, he was employed as an installer for ADT Security Services, a position that gave him knowledge of alarm systems and entry points to homes. In the early 1990s, he became a compliance officer in Park City, a role similar to a law enforcement position, with authority to enforce codes and ordinances. He was married with children, known publicly as a church member and Boy Scout leader. Despite this public life, he maintained a hidden life as the serial killer later identified as BTK, which stood for Bind, Torture, Murder. The first murders attributed to Rader occurred on January 15, 1974. On that day, he entered the Wichita home of Joseph Otero, a 38-year-old, and choked him along with his wife Julie, aged 34, and two of their children, Joseph Otero Jr., aged 9, and Josephine Otero, aged 11. The murders were premeditated, involving bindings with ropes and the use of suffocation. The sequence was brutal but carefully planned. Rader later admitted that he watched the family before entering and once inside, forced them into submission before methodically binding and murdering them. The crime shocked Wichita, but no immediate suspect was identified. Over the following years, Rader carried out additional murders. In April 1974, he murdered Catherine Bright, aged 21. In her home, he used a knife on her repeatedly, and finally choked her. In March 1977, he murdered Shirley Vianne, a 24-year-old mother, in her home while her children were locked in a bathroom. In December 1977, he murdered Nancy Fox, aged 25, after breaking into her home. In April 1985, he choked to death Maureen Hedge, aged 53, and later transported her body to a church where he posed her before leaving her remains in a ditch. In September 1986, he murdered Vicky Waygirl, aged 28. His final confirmed murder occurred in January 1991 when he choked to death Dolores Davis, aged 62, in her home, and disposed of her body under a bridge. Throughout this period, Rader taunted police and the media. He sent letters to local newspapers and law enforcement agencies detailing the crimes, using the nickname BTK and demanding recognition. The letters included crime scene descriptions and photocopies of items taken from victims' homes, such as driver's licenses. After 1991, he stopped communicating, and the case went cold for more than a decade. In 2004, on the 30th anniversary of the Otero murders, Rader resumed contact. He sent packages to local media outlets containing photographs, victim items, and detailed descriptions of crimes only the murderer would know. He also mailed computer disks, mistakenly believing they could not be traced. Investigators tracked a disk to a computer at Christ Lutheran Church, where Rader was council president. Further DNA testing of his daughter's medical sample, obtained legally, confirmed a familial match to DNA recovered from the crime scenes. On February 25, 2005, Dennis Rader was arrested near his home in Park City. At the police station, he calmly confessed to the murders, detailing each crime in matter-of-fact language. He explained his methods of stalking, entering homes, binding victims, and ultimately murdering them. Rader was charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder. Judge Gregory Waller sentenced him to 10 consecutive life sentences, ensuring he would never be released. He has been held in solitary confinement for long periods due to concerns about his safety and his notoriety. In prison, he has written letters and occasionally communicated with media and criminologists, offering explanations of his crimes, referring to them as projects, and describing what he called a Factor X compulsion. He has not expressed remorse in a conventional sense but has acknowledged responsibility. He has served 20 years of his life sentence. Number 16, Stephen Arthur Rios. On the early morning of the 5th of June 2004, Officer Rios Stephen encountered Jesse James Wade Valencia, aged 23, a student at the University of Missouri. Valencia's body was discovered between two buildings near the campus around dawn. He had suffered a deep throat wound inflicted by a serrated knife. Autopsy findings also showed evidence of strangulation and bruising to his chest, back, and jaw. There were no defensive wounds, but forensic experts concluded a chokehold had been used before the throat cut. Valencia had been partially clothed, and the location suggested he attempted to flee before collapsing. Soon after the discovery of the body, Rios inserted himself into the investigation. He volunteered to guard Valencia's body at the crime scene later that same day. Investigators later learned that Valencia had an ongoing clandestine relationship with Rios, which Valencia had begun after a prior arrest by Rios. Rios had reportedly visited Valencia's apartment unannounced on multiple occasions, sometimes participating in intimate activity. One of Valencia's other intimate partners, Andy Schermerhorn, later cooperated with investigators, testifying that he had been present during some of those visits and that Valencia threatened to expose the affair to Rios's police superiors. In the days following the murder, Rios's behavior drew scrutiny. He called his police captain and expressed guilt over some bad actions, even suggesting thoughts. He attempted to hurt himself by threatening to use a shotgun, and later was placed under psychiatric commitment for a time. On one occasion, he climbed to the edge of a parking garage and threatened to jump. He was stopped and hospitalized. Investigators tied physical evidence to him: DNA under Valencia's nails, arm hairs on Valencia's chest, and Rios's own hair matching forced contact consistent with a chokehold. Rios was arrested later in 2004 and charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. In May 2005, he was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, plus a consecutive 10-year sentence for the weapon enhancement. He initially denied the murder, though he admitted the affair with Valencia. As of August 2025, Stephen Arthur Rios remains incarcerated, having served about 20 years in prison since his 2005 conviction. He served as a patrolman in the Columbia Police Department. Married with an infant child, Rios was considered a capable officer. Number 17. Arthur Seal. Arthur Seal was 45 years old at the time of the crime. He had previously worked as a police officer in Hillside, New Jersey, and later served as a security manager for Exxon. In those roles, he acquired insight into security protocols, executive vulnerability, and surveillance techniques. Financial difficulties, mounting debt, and resentment toward his employer had eroded his stability. His wife, Irene Seal, was also complicit in many of his later plans. On the morning of April 29, 1992, at approximately 7 Sydney J. Rizzo, aged 57, and then Vice President of International Operations at Exxon, exited his residence in Morris Township to retrieve his newspaper. As he walked down the driveway, Irene Seal, jogging by, kicked the paper onto the lawn, forcing Rizzo to step further out of his vehicle. At that moment, Arthur Seal and Irene were waiting in a van parked nearby, outfitted with a magnetic fake company sign to deflect attention. Arthur exited, confronted Rizzo at gunpoint, shot him in the arm when he resisted, bound and gagged him, and forced him into a wooden box in the back of the van. After driving off, they transported Rizzo into a storage locker facility in Washington Township, New Jersey, where they confined him in a box with little ventilation, food, or water. Over the next 4 days, the couple remained in contact with authorities by phone and letter, demanding a ransom of $18.5 million in used $100 bills. Their communications included misleading claims of environmental group involvement and pseudonyms such as Fernand Pereira Brigade. Meanwhile, Rizzo, suffering from shock, heat exposure, and lack of medical care, died inside the box. On the 28th of June 1992, Rizzo's body was discovered in Bass River State Forest, about 50 miles away. Seal and his wife had buried him in a shallow grave in the Pine Barrens. Investigators traced the kidnappers through phone calls, ransom notes, and surveillance. A key break came when officials observed a man wearing latex gloves using a public phone after making a demand call. They recorded his license plate. That plate led to a rental vehicle traced to Arthur Seal. Agents intercepted the van and sealed the van's contents. Shortly afterward, Seal and Irene were arrested at the car rental office. Arthur arrived voluntarily, and Irene showed up minutes later. Seal was charged federally with kidnapping resulting in death, murder, and related offenses. He pleaded guilty in 1994 in a deal that foreclosed a death sentence under federal statute. He confessed to orchestrating and executing the abduction and murder, and agreed to cooperate in locating the victim's body. Irene also pleaded guilty and agreed to testify against Arthur. At sentencing, Arthur was given a 95-year prison term, and Irene was sentenced to 20 years. Irene was released in November 2009 after serving a reduced sentence in light of her cooperation and time served. As of August 2025, Arthur Seal has served approximately 30 years of his 95-year federal sentence. Number 18. Michael Thomas Slager. On the morning of the 4th of April 2015, Officer Slager conducted a traffic stop of a vehicle driven by Walter Lamar Scott, aged 50, over a non-functioning brake light. Scott exited the vehicle and fled on foot. Slager pursued on foot, drawing his taser and deploying it at Scott, who fell to the ground. After Scott regained his footing, he continued running away. Slager then drew his issued handgun and fired 8 shots at Scott. 5 of those bullets struck Scott, all entering from behind. Scott died as a result of the multiple gunshot wounds. Witnesses recorded the shooting on a cell phone. In that video, Scott is visible fleeing when the shots are fired. Immediately after the shooting, Slager retrieved his taser, walked back to the scene, and placed it next to Scott's body. In official statements afterward, Slager claimed that Scott had attempted to grab the taser during a struggle. Investigators concluded that Slager's actions were inconsistent with that claim, and that the positioning of the taser was suggestive of staging or an attempt to justify his use of force. Slager was placed on administrative leave and dismissed from the North Charleston Police Department following formal charges. He faced state and federal prosecutions. In state court, Slager was indicted for murder. On the 7th of December 2017, Slager was sentenced in federal court to 20 years in prison. As of August 2025, Michael Thomas Slager has served approximately 7.5 years of his 20-year federal sentence. Number 19. Lee Cole. Lee Cole was 28 years old at the time of the incident. He served as a police officer with the Punta Gorda Police Department. He was relatively early in his career, known within the agency for routine patrol and training assignments, and had no prior homicide convictions or major misconduct on record. On the morning of the 9th of August 2016, the Punta Gorda Police Department hosted a Citizens Police Academy attended by about 30 community leaders. As part of the event, role-playing exercises were planned to demonstrate use of force scenarios. Cole was assigned the role of bad guy in one of the simulations, while Mary Knowlton, age 73 and a retired librarian, was selected to play the role of the police officer in that scenario. Knowlton had never used a firearm. She was handed what was supposed to be a revolver loaded with blank rounds. Participants were told to react when they believed they were facing a threat. During the simulation, Cole was to initiate a mock burglary and fire blanks downward near the ground to startle Knowlton. Instead, Cole loaded what he believed or claimed to believe were blanks into his Smith & Wesson .38 caliber revolver. In fact, 2 live wadcutter rounds had been mixed into the ammunition boxes he received. Cole fired his weapon in the direction of Knowlton. 2 bullets struck her. One hit her arm, and the other perforated her aorta, causing massive internal bleeding. Knowlton collapsed in the parking lot, while family members, academy participants, and onlookers watched in horror. Emergency responders rushed her to a hospital, but she died thereafter. Immediately following the shooting, Cole was placed on administrative leave while the department and Florida's state law enforcement agencies investigated. He remained on the payroll until February 2017, when he was terminated 2 weeks after criminal charges were filed. During the investigation, it emerged that Cole had brought his personal firearm from home to the exercise, as the department had provided only 1 Glock for the event. The ammunition boxes he obtained were inconsistent. 2 were labeled Blazer, which he believed to be blanks, but 1 box was incompatible with his revolver. He tested the Blazer rounds earlier in a different jurisdiction, without anyone raising concern, he said. Despite that, no safety officer had been designated for the exercise. There was no briefing, no equipment inspection, and no protective gear for participants. In early 2017, Cole was charged with second-degree manslaughter under Florida law. In one motion, he claimed he had no intention to harm Knowlton and believed his rounds were blanks. The case did not proceed to a full trial. In October 2019, Cole entered a plea of no contest to second-degree manslaughter. Under Florida law, and as part of the plea agreement, the court withheld adjudication of guilt, meaning Cole was not formally convicted but was placed under probation. He was sentenced to 10 years of probation, ordered to pay restitution to Mary Knowlton's husband Gary Knowlton, and barred from future service as a law enforcement officer. He avoided any jail time under the plea deal. Number 20. Eric Ruch Jr. On the evening of the 27th of December 2017, Officer Ruch and a partner engaged in a vehicular pursuit of a suspect, later identified as Dennis Plowden Jr., who was driving a vehicle reportedly involved in multiple traffic violations. The chase continued through the city streets in Philadelphia. Eventually, the pursuit ended near the 5,900 block of Germantown Avenue. Plowden's vehicle came to rest, and he exited the car. According to testimony at trial, Plowden moved toward a sidewalk area. At that moment, within 6 to 8 seconds of arriving at the scene, Rouch shot Plowden in the head. Plowden was unarmed, with his left hand raised. He collapsed and died shortly thereafter. Witnesses and prosecutors later emphasized that Plowden was surrendering at the time he was shot. Immediately afterward, Rouch remained at the scene. He radioed in the shooting and cooperated with first responders. The police department initially suspended him. In June 2018, the Philadelphia Police Department notified Rouch of a 30-day suspension with the intent to dismiss him for improper use of a firearm while off duty. On the 21st of September 2022, the jury delivered a verdict. Rouch was found guilty of voluntary manslaughter and possession of an instrument of crime. He was acquitted of third-degree murder, and the judge sentenced Rouch to 11.5 to 23 months in state prison. In June 2023, after serving less than 1 year, he was released from prison. Number 21. Mohammed Noor. Mohammed Noor was 31 years old at the time of the shooting. Born in Somalia, he immigrated to the United States as a child, and later became a naturalized citizen. He joined the Minneapolis Police Department in 2015, becoming the first Somali-American officer assigned to his precinct. Before his employment in law enforcement, he worked in business and community service. His recruitment was often cited as part of efforts to diversify the force and improve relationships with immigrant communities in Minneapolis. On the evening of July 15, 2017, a 40-year-old woman named Justine Ruschek-Damond called 911 to report a possible assault occurring near her home in the Fulton neighborhood of Minneapolis. Damond, who was originally from Australia, lived with her fiancé and worked as a life coach and meditation teacher. Around 11:30 p.m., she placed 2 separate emergency calls, explaining that she heard what sounded like a woman in distress behind her residence. Officers Mohammed Noor and his partner Matthew Harity responded to the call in a marked police SUV. Harity drove the vehicle while Noor occupied the passenger seat. As they entered the alleyway behind Damond's house with their lights off, they reported hearing a loud noise. Shortly after, Damond approached the driver's side of the squad car. Harity later testified that he was startled when Damond appeared suddenly at his window. At that moment, Noor drew his service weapon and fired a single shot across his partner through the open driver's side window. The bullet struck Damond in the abdomen. She collapsed immediately and died at the scene despite efforts by emergency responders. She was unarmed, wearing only pajamas, and carrying no object in her hands. Following the shooting, Noor and Harity remained at the scene. Both gave statements, though the accounts initially varied. Noor declined to speak to state investigators in the immediate aftermath, as was his legal right. The case drew significant public attention, both locally and internationally, as Damond's killing involved a civilian caller who had sought police assistance and was instead fatally shot. The Minneapolis Police Department placed Noor on administrative leave. In March 2018, the Hennepin County Attorney's Office charged him with third-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter. He was terminated from the police force the same day the charges were announced. On April 30, 2019, the jury found Noor guilty of third-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter. He was acquitted of second-degree murder. He received a term of 12.5 years in prison for third-degree murder. In June 2022, Noor was released from prison and placed under supervised release for the remainder of his sentence. Number 22. William Ben Darby. William Ben Darby was a sergeant with the Huntsville Police Department at the time of the incident. He had served many years in law enforcement, rising through the ranks from patrol duty to supervisory roles. He was in his mid-40s, he was married, employed by the city, and held in local regard as a capable officer prior to the shooting. On the 3rd of April 2018, Darby and other police units responded to a 911 call placed by 49-year-old Jeffrey Lewis Parker, who reported that he was armed and intended to hurt himself. The address was a residence in West Huntsville. Officers Janisha Pegues and Justin Beckles were among the first to arrive. Officer Pegues entered partially into the residence and saw Parker seated on a couch with what appeared to be a firearm held to his head. She spoke with him calmly, attempting de-escalation. Meanwhile, Darby, who was nearby, responded to the radio call and approached the scene with his shotgun in hand. Body camera footage later revealed that Darby entered the home soon after Pegues had begun negotiations. Darby yelled orders to Parker to put down the weapon, then, without additional warning, opened fire. He shot Parker within seconds of entering the room. Parker fell backward, fatally wounded. A subsequent investigation found that the supposed firearm held by Parker was in fact a flare firearm painted black, unknown to the officers at the time. After the shooting, Darby remained at the scene and gave statements to internal and criminal investigators. The Huntsville Police Department administratively suspended him pending investigation. A Madison County grand jury later indicted him on a charge of murder. The city also formally terminated his police employment by removing him from duty and stripping his badge. The trial took place in the summer of 2021 Madison County Circuit Court, and the jury found Darby guilty of murder. The court thereafter sentenced him to 25 years in prison. Darby had already served approximately 20 months in prison under his original conviction before his appellate reversal. Those months are credited toward his sentence under the plea. He exited custody upon the plea deal and began probation supervision. As of August 2025, William Ben Darby is not in prison. Number 23. Adam Lunn. On the night of the 9th of September 2018, deputies Lunn and James O'Brien were assigned to transport a man named Demetrius Shankling, age 23, who had been detained by Boulder police and was intoxicated. The plan was to deliver him to the Addiction Recovery Center for detoxification. Shankling had last been seen on the University of Colorado campus celebrating a birthday. As he was placed into custody, he was not combative. Witnesses and the deputies agreed that no force had been used at that point. Lunn and O'Brien loaded Shankling into a small rear compartment of their transport van. The compartment was less than 5 feet in length. Shankling was handcuffed behind his back and placed face down in that restricted space. During the ride, approximately 16 minutes, Shankling became unresponsive. When deputies arrived at ARC and opened the van, they discovered that Shankling was unconscious and not breathing. They immediately began life support measures, and paramedics transported him to the hospital in critical condition. He remained in a coma for 27 days before dying on the 6th of October 2018. An autopsy determined the cause of death was positional asphyxia exacerbated by high blood alcohol and amphetamine levels. The sheriff's office suspended Lunn and O'Brien pending an investigation. The Boulder County District Attorney charged both deputies with manslaughter, arguing that they had acted recklessly by placing Shankling in a dangerously confined position and ignoring protocols against positional restraint. Their trial took place in August 2021, and the jury found both Lunn and O'Brien guilty of manslaughter. O'Brien received a 6-year sentence, while Lunn was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Number 24. Anthony Fox. Anthony Fox was about 35 years old at the time of the incident. He served as a detective with the Jackson Police Department and later worked with the Clinton Police Department. He had a long career in law enforcement and had earned commendations over time, though he had faced internal criticism and scrutiny as part of the department's operations. On the night of January 13, 2019, Jackson police officers were executing a hot sheet sweep, looking for suspects connected to the recent fatal shooting of a pastor. Detective Fox, along with fellow officers Desmond Barney and Lincoln Lampley, entered a residential area on Jones Avenue. At approximately 9 p.m., they encountered 62-year-old George Robinson sitting in his parked car. According to the officers, they ordered Robinson to step out of the vehicle. Robinson, who had suffered a recent stroke and used medication, said he was moving slowly and attempting to remove his seatbelt. Fox exited his patrol vehicle, opened the door of Robinson's car, and forcibly removed him. Witnesses across the street testified that Fox threw Robinson to the ground, struck his head against pavement or a vehicle, knelt on his back, and applied pressure to his head. One neighbor, Constance Bolton, live-streamed video of the altercation on Facebook, capturing in part the physical struggle. Medical examiners later found bruising, abrasions, and internal bleeding in Robinson's brain, diagnosing a fatal subdural hematoma. Robinson lapsed into seizures and was hospitalized, dying 2 days later, on January 15th. The coroner ruled his death a homicide by blunt trauma. Fox and the 2 other officers were placed on administrative leave. Because Fox's father had connections in the Hinds County Attorney's Office, the Mississippi Attorney General's Office was assigned oversight of the prosecution. In August 2020, a grand jury indicted Fox, Barney, and Lampley on second-degree murder charges in Robinson's death. The 3 surrendered and were released on bond, pending trial. While Barney and Lampley faced dismissal of their charges later, Fox's case proceeded independently. In July 2022, Fox's trial commenced in Hinds County Circuit Court. Testimony included that of Bolton, neighbors, and forensic pathologists. Fox's defense claimed that he believed Robinson posed a threat or might be fleeing. He denied using excessive force and argued he acted in self-defense under tense circumstances. On August 5, 2022, the jury returned a verdict convicting Fox of culpable negligence manslaughter, a lesser-included offense, and assault. Circuit Judge Adrian Wooten sentenced him to 5 years in prison, suspending 15 years of a 20-year sentence, and imposed 5 years probation. The sentence included credit for time already served. On January 30, 2024, the Mississippi Court of Appeals overturned Fox's conviction in a 6-4 decision, ruling that the evidence did not support a finding of culpable negligence. Fox was released, having served approximately 552 days, about 1 year and 5 months in custody. He was reinstated as a law enforcement officer in a limited capacity. In February 2024, he returned to policing with the Clinton Police Department. Number 25. Nathaniel Hendren. Nathaniel Hendren was 29 years old at the time of the incident. He was a relatively new officer with the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, having served approximately 1 year on the force. Before joining the department, he had served in the United States Marine Corps. He lived in the Carondelet neighborhood of St. Louis, and was known socially to have had a romantic relationship with fellow officer Katlyn Alex, who was 24 at the time. On the night of January 24, 2019, Hendren, while on duty, invited Officer Alex to his apartment in Carondelet, under the pretext that she planned to bring him medicine for a cold. Shortly before midnight, Alex arrived at the residence. According to Hendren's later admissions, the two began to handle a revolver in what they described as a Russian roulette-style game. Hendren removed all rounds from the cylinder, then placed a single live round into it, spun the chamber, and proceeded to dry fire, pull the trigger on an empty chamber several times. After that sequence, he returned the revolver to Alex, who also pulled the trigger without injury. Finally, Hendren pointed the revolver at Alex's chest and fired. The bullet struck her in the chest. Alex was pronounced dead at a hospital shortly thereafter. Another officer present, Hendren's partner Patrick Reardon had attempted to stop them but left the room due to discomfort and heard the fatal shot behind him. In the immediate aftermath, Hendren and Reardon transported Alix in a patrol car to a hospital, but she did not survive. Law enforcement treated the shooting as a criminal matter. The St. Louis Police Department suspended Hendren, and his police authority was revoked. He was formally terminated from the force following his indictment. In February 2020, Hendren pleaded guilty to 1 count of involuntary manslaughter and 1 count of armed criminal action in the death of Officer Alix. As part of the plea, first-degree involuntary manslaughter charges were resolved in exchange for a sentence of 7 years in prison, the maximum under the plea agreement. By early 2024, Hendren became eligible for parole and was released in October 2024. He served approximately 4 years of his 7-year sentence before parole. Number 26. Gerald Goines. Gerald Goines was a seasoned narcotics officer with the Houston Police Department at the time of the incident. He had served for decades and was viewed as an experienced, assertive investigator with deep involvement in Houston's narcotics unit. Colleagues and critics alike had noted his aggressive tactics over the years, but he maintained a long tenure without prior murder charges. On the morning of the 28th of January 2019, Goines led a no-knock raid on the home of Dennis Tuttle, aged 59, and his wife, Rogina Nicholas, aged 58. Located on Harding Street in Houston's Pecan Park neighborhood, the raid had been authorized on the basis of a search warrant that cited a purported confidential informant purchasing black tar heroin from the couple's residence. However, subsequent investigations revealed that the warrant application fabricated the existence of such an informant and misrepresented the evidence. The raid was part of a narcotics operation involving multiple officers. As officers forced entry, a gunfight erupted. 2 officers were shot, 1 was paralyzed, and 5 in total sustained injuries. In the process, Tuttle and Nicholas were both killed. Tuttle suffered multiple gunshot wounds to the head, neck, chest, and limbs. Nicholas was struck in the chest and thigh. Their dog also died. No controlled substances or significant amounts of drugs were found in the home. Police recovered minor amounts of hard substances. The scene devolved quickly into chaos and tragedy. Afterwards, Goines claimed that the raid had been legitimate, asserting that Tuttle had fired into officers, thereby justifying their use of force. But investigators and prosecutors revealed that Goines had misled the judge to obtain the warrant, fabricated the confidential informant narrative, and suppressed exculpatory information. The Houston Police Department immediately suspended Goines. He was effectively removed from active duty, and his law enforcement authority was revoked pending criminal proceedings. The judge ultimately sentenced him to 60 years in prison, a term widely regarded as effectively a life sentence. Number 27. Jeffrey Nelson. Jeffrey Nelson was 35 years old when he fatally shot Jesse Seri, a 26-year-old homeless man, outside a convenience store in Auburn, Washington. Nelson had served for over a decade as an Auburn police officer and had a history of using deadly force. He had killed Isaiah Obet in 2017 and Brian Scammon in 2011. His conduct and reputation had been under increasing scrutiny in local complaints, but no criminal action had been taken before 2019. On the evening of the 31st of May 2019, Nelson responded to reports of a man causing a disturbance, throwing things at cars, kicking walls, banging on windows in front of a convenience store. Nelson approached Jesse Seri and attempted to place him under arrest for disorderly conduct. According to witness and video evidence, Nelson first struck Seri several times, pinned him against a wall, and punched him repeatedly. As the struggle proceeded, Nelson drew his handgun and fired 1 shot into Seri's abdomen. Seri fell to the ground, wounded but not yet incapacitated. Nelson's weapon jammed momentarily. After clearing the malfunction, he turned toward Seri's forehead and discharged a second shot, killing him almost instantly. The entire encounter lasted approximately 67 seconds from initiation to the second shot. Surveillance video captured the sequence, contradicting Nelson's later claim that he acted in self-defense. Witnesses stated that after the first shot, Seri was on his back, motionless, and not posing a threat when Nelson fired again. Nelson remained at the scene. He radioed for EMS and attempted to administer first aid, though evidence later showed that he delayed securing the area and failed to reholster his firearm or render optimal care. The Auburn Police Department placed him on paid administrative leave and opened an internal investigation. In 2020, under Washington State's newly revised law, Initiative 940, Nelson was charged with second-degree murder and first-degree assault for the death of Seri. That statute eliminated the requirement that prosecutors prove malice for killings by officers. Reducing the burden to show force was unreasonable or unnecessary. Nelson pleaded not guilty, asserting that Seri had tried to grab Nelson's firearm or had a knife, and that his actions were defensive. He also claimed that after the first shot, Seri remained threatening and justified the second shot. The defense narrative emphasized Nelson's training, split-second decision-making, and the traumatic escalation of the situation. On the 27th of June 2024, the jury found Nelson guilty of second-degree murder and first-degree assault, and he was sentenced to 16 years and 8 months in prison. He was immediately taken into custody following the verdict. The conviction marked the first time an officer in Washington was convicted under the state's revised policing law. Number 28. Andrew Lyons. Andrew Lyons was 39 years old at the time of the incident. He had served for about 15 years as a deputy with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, performing various patrol and enforcement duties. His record included the standard certifications and training required of deputies, though he had not previously been criminally charged for lethal force. He was considered a veteran in the force and was presumed to act under standard departmental protocols. On the evening of June 6, 2019, Lyons and fellow deputy Christopher Muse responded to a call in Willowbrook involving Ryan Twyman, age 24, who had been reportedly involved in gun possession violations. The deputies approached Twyman, who was seated in a parked vehicle, a Kia Forte, along with a passenger. As the deputies exited their vehicle and approached, Twyman put his car in reverse. Deputies Muse and Lyons opened fire. Surveillance video showed the vehicle slowly backing up and both deputies discharging weapons during the movement. Lyons then retrieved a semi-automatic assault rifle from the trunk of his patrol car and continued firing at the vehicle after it came to a stop. Twyman was struck multiple times in the neck and upper body and died at the scene. The passenger was not hit by gunfire but suffered from flying glass and was taken to the hospital. The deputies fired a total of 34 rounds at the vehicle during the incident. Following the shooting, Lyons was placed on administrative leave. On January 12, 2024, the court sentenced Lyons to 30 days in county jail and 2 years of formal probation under the terms of the plea agreement. Number 29. Benito Soto. Benito Soto was a detective with the Fresno Police Department at the time of the crash. He was in his mid-40s, having served for years in law enforcement, and had a stable professional record without prior homicide or criminal convictions on his public file. He drove a marked department vehicle and carried the usual responsibilities of a detective in urban policing. On the night of the 5th of September 2020, Soto was driving west on Fresno Street, approaching the intersection with E Street in Fresno. The traffic signal at his direction was green. At the same time, a pedestrian, Jose Pulido, age 51, pushed a bicycle across the crosswalk, entering against a red light. Soto, according to later investigations, was texting on his mobile phone in the moments before the collision. His attention was diverted. As Pulido stepped into the crosswalk, Soto's vehicle struck him with significant force. Pulido sustained severe injuries and was transported to Community Regional Medical Center, where he later died. Following the crash, internal and external investigations ensued. The Fresno Police Department and subsequent agencies examined mobile phone records, vehicle telemetry, intersection signal data, and the scene. Investigators concluded Soto had been distracted by texting, failed to yield to a pedestrian in the crosswalk, and did not take evasive action that the situation allowed. The area was well lit, and the pedestrian was visible from a distance. The department suspended Soto, and Internal Affairs reviewed his conduct. On the 28th of June 2024, the court imposed 1 year of probation and 400 hours of community service, along with requirements to complete a distracted driving course and to pay restitution. Number 30. Sidney Dorsey. Sidney Dorsey was 60 years old at the time of the events that would define his legacy. He had built a long career in law enforcement, beginning as a patrolman and working his way up through the ranks in DeKalb County, Georgia. By the late 1990s, he had achieved prominence as the elected sheriff of DeKalb County, the first African American to hold that post. Dorsey had cultivated a reputation as an experienced officer and politician, though his tenure was marked by internal disputes and corruption allegations. He held ambitions of continuing his role beyond his initial term and campaigned vigorously in the year 1999 for re-election. In August 1999, Dorsey lost the Democratic runoff election for sheriff to challenger Derwin Brown, a 46-year-old law enforcement officer who had served as a captain in the DeKalb Police Department. Brown ran on a reformist platform, openly promising to investigate corruption and mismanagement within the sheriff's office. His victory, after years of controversy under Dorsey, was seen as a turning point in the county's law enforcement culture. Brown was set to be sworn into office in January of 2000. On the night of January 4, 2000, only 3 days before Brown's scheduled inauguration, he returned home after attending a training session. As he pulled into the driveway of his residence in DeKalb County, he was ambushed and shot multiple times. Neighbors and family members reported hearing gunfire and rushed outside to find Brown fatally wounded. Emergency responders pronounced him dead at the scene. Investigators quickly suspected a political motive, given the timing and the open hostility between Brown and members of Dorsey's circle. Over the following months, law enforcement uncovered evidence linking Dorsey to a conspiracy to assassinate Brown. Testimony from co-conspirators and intermediaries described meetings in which Dorsey allegedly ordered the murder to prevent Brown from exposing corruption and dismantling the networks of influence he had built. In 2002, Dorsey was indicted on multiple counts, including murder, racketeering, and violation of oath of office. After weeks of proceedings, the jury found Dorsey guilty of murder and racketeering, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As of August 2025, Sidney Dorsey has served 23 years of his life sentence.
Number 1. Officer Stephen Flood. On September 18, 2018, Stephen Flood, a 69-year-old deputy with the Horry County Sheriff's Office in South Carolina, and a fellow officer, Deputy Joshua Bishop, were assigned to transport 2 women, 45-year-old Wendy Newton and 43-year-old Nicolette Green, to a mental health facility. Both women had been involuntarily committed, however. Their families contended that they were not violent and were seeking help for mental health issues. Newton suffered fear and anxiety and had gone to the hospital seeking medicine. Green was committed by a mental health counselor her family says she had never seen before. The state law authorizes the sheriff's department to detain and transfer people for involuntary committals. Despite numerous road closures due to flooding from Hurricane Florence, Flood chose to drive the transport van through a flooded roadway in Marion County. As the van approached a barricade, National Guardsmen lowered it, as they did for all emergency vehicles. After a brief exchange with them, Flood drove into the floodwaters. After driving through, the van was swept away by floodwaters and became pinned against a guardrail. Flood and fellow deputy Joshua Bishop managed to escape the vehicle, but the two women were locked up in the back of the van. Efforts to rescue them were unsuccessful, and the van lacked an emergency escape hatch, complicating rescue attempts. Bishop tried and failed to shoot out the lock. The van soon filled with water and drowned the women, making them two of the hurricane's 9 victims in the state. The deputies were later rescued from atop the vehicle, and both were fired the following month. Flood was arrested and charged with 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter and 2 counts of reckless homicide. In May 2022, a jury found him guilty on all charges. However, due to legal considerations preventing multiple punishments for the same offense, the involuntary manslaughter charges were later dropped. He was sentenced to 9 years for each count of reckless homicide, to be served consecutively, totaling 18 years in prison. The detainees' families sued the county, blaming Flood for his decision to push through the rising waters and Bishop for failing to stop him. Those suits were reportedly settled for a total of $6.3 million in August 2021. As of 2025, Flood has served approximately 3 years of his 18-year sentence. He is currently incarcerated in a South Carolina state prison. Flood has filed an appeal for a new trial, arguing that certain evidence presented during his trial, such as drone footage of the flooded area, was prejudicial and misrepresented the conditions at the time of the incident. Number 2, Officer Jessie Hernandez. Jessie Hernandez was 35 years old at the time of his conviction. He had previously served as a police officer for the Corpus Christi Police Department and later with the Robstown Police Department in Texas. His tenure in law enforcement included incidents involving the use of deadly force while on duty. In one instance, he shot and murdered a Rottweiler during a service call. In another, he fatally shot a motorist whom he claimed was trying to murder him by using a vehicle as a weapon. He was eventually terminated from police service and transitioned into work repossessing property. The incident that led to his most serious criminal charges occurred in September 2013. On that day, 2 Selma police officers responded to a domestic disturbance call involving him and his wife, Roseanne Hernandez. A witness had called and reported seeing Hernandez drag a screaming woman, later identified as Roseanne, back into the home owned by his parents. Officers Tiffany Kirum and Sergeant Jesse Balderramas were dispatched to the scene to investigate. Upon arrival, Officer Kirum attempted to engage with Hernandez, but the situation escalated quickly. During the response, Jesse Hernandez produced a firearm and opened fire on the officers. Officer Kirum was shot in the face, while Sergeant Balderramas was shot in the leg. Both officers survived the shooting, although Kirum sustained serious facial injuries. After the incident, Hernandez was arrested and charged with multiple offenses. The primary charge brought to trial was aggravated assault of a public servant in relation to the shooting of Officer Kirum. He was convicted on that charge by a jury in 2014. During the sentencing phase of the trial, the prosecution, led by District Attorney Nicholas LaHood and Prosecutor Jason Goss, sought a life sentence. The prosecution presented testimony from Roseanne Hernandez, who described a pattern of abusive behavior by her husband. She testified that he had previously shoved her into a wall while she was 6 months pregnant, resulting in a broken clavicle. The state also played a recorded jail phone call between the couple in which Hernandez questioned her loyalty after learning she had spoken with the district attorney's office. In the call, he expressed concern about the outcome of the trial, saying, "I'm probably going to go to jail now." In his defense, Hernandez's mother, Laverne Hernandez, testified about his past experiences in law enforcement. She stated that he had a flat effect when discussing past shootings, including one in which he shot a man in the head during a confrontation involving a vehicle. She expressed concern over his emotional detachment when recounting those events. The jury ultimately sided with the prosecution. Hernandez was sentenced to life in prison for the shooting of Officer Kirum. During the sentencing, he was formally discharged from any affiliation with law enforcement agencies. The ruling marked a permanent end to his career in public service. After sentencing, Hernandez did not make a public statement in court. There were no further remarks from him addressing the victims or their families directly. Following the conviction, Hernandez was transferred to the custody of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. He began serving his sentence at the William G. McConnell Unit, a state prison facility located in Beeville, Texas. As of May 2025, he remains incarcerated there and is not eligible for parole due to the nature of his sentence. He has served approximately 11 years in prison. He has made several appeals, but no successful appeal has been recorded. Number 3, Officer Michael Dotro. Michael A. Dotro was 40 years old at the time of his sentencing in 2017. He served as a police officer with the Edison Police Department in New Jersey for over 10 years. During his tenure, Dotro was the subject of multiple internal investigations, including at least 11 excessive force complaints. These incidents led to administrative actions, such as mandated psychological evaluations and shift reassignments. On May 23, 2013, in the early hours of the morning, he approached the Monroe Township residence of his supervisor, Captain Mark Anderko. At the time, Anderko's wife, 2 children, and his 92-year-old mother were all asleep inside the house. Dotro, acting alone, threw an ignited Molotov cocktail inside the home, starting a fire. The family escaped unharmed. Investigators later revealed the attack was allegedly motivated by retaliation after Anderko had reassigned Dotro and ordered him to undergo a fitness for duty evaluation following his 11th excessive force complaint. The Middlesex County Prosecutor's Office conducted an extensive investigation, led by detectives Donald Heck and Christopher Panisi. Evidence collected included surveillance footage, forensic analysis, and witness testimonies, which resulted in Dotro's arrest. He was also implicated in multiple other misconduct cases. These included slashing the tires of a fellow officer, cyberbullying a colleague, purchasing and distributing hard substances while in uniform, and tampering with police records. He also faced charges for tampering with witnesses and retaliating against a North Brunswick police officer. In 2017, during his trial, Dotro entered a guilty plea to multiple charges: first-degree attempted murder, second-degree aggravated arson, second-degree official misconduct, third-degree conspiracy to tamper with a witness, and fourth-degree conspiracy to retaliate. On September 7, 2017, Middlesex County Superior Court judge sentenced Dotro to a total of 20 years in state prison. The sentence was subject to the No Early Release Act, requiring Dotro to serve at least 85% of his term, approximately 17 years, before becoming eligible for parole. The judge described Dotro's actions as a betrayal of his duties, calling his time in uniform a complete fraud. He also emphasized the seriousness of launching an attack on a home known to be occupied, referring to the act as depraved. All his sentences were ordered to run concurrently. A 5-year period of parole supervision was also imposed following his eventual release. Additionally, the court imposed restraining orders to protect the victims involved. Following his conviction, he was formally discharged from the Edison Police Department. Dotro's demeanor in court was largely restrained. He offered no apology to the victims during sentencing and did not make an extended public statement. No remorse was recorded in court transcripts, and his attorney, Robert Norton, did not provide a post-sentencing comment to the media. In 2023, he applied for sentence reduction credits under the Public Health Emergency Credits Act enacted in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. His application was denied by the New Jersey Department of Corrections, citing his projected release date of July 12, 2034. As of May 2025, Michael Dotro is incarcerated at East Jersey State Prison in Rahway, New Jersey. He has served approximately 7 years and 8 months of his 20-year sentence. His earliest eligibility for parole will be in 2034, following the completion of the mandatory 85% of his sentence as required by NARA. There is no public record of any final statements made by Dotro at the time of his sentencing. Number 4. Officer Jovanny Crespo. Jovanny Crespo was 26 years old at the time of his sentencing in May 2024. He served as a patrol officer with the Newark Police Department in New Jersey. Crespo had less than 2 years of experience at the time of the incident in January 2019. He joined the department after completing more than 6 months of training at the police academy, where he was instructed in the lawful use of force. At the time of the incident, he was partnered with another officer who also had limited experience on the force. On the night of January 28, 2019, Crespo was on duty with his partner, Officer Eric Ortiz, when a dispatch call went out regarding a Chrysler 300 reportedly fleeing a traffic stop. The officers believed that they saw a firearm inside the vehicle, prompting to a high-speed chase through the area of Clinton Avenue and Thomas Street. During the 5-minute chase, which was captured on both dashcam and body-worn cameras, Crespo exited the patrol vehicle 3 times. At each stop, he discharged his weapon at the vehicle. At the final location on Irving Turner Boulevard, Crespo fatally shot the driver, 46-year-old Gregory Griffin, and the passenger, 35-year-old Andrew J. Dixon. The chase concluded near the 54 Irvine Turner Boulevard, where both Griffin and Dixon were found with gunshot wounds. Griffin succumbed to his injuries the following day at University Hospital, while Dixon, who was struck in the face, survived the shooting, but had serious facial injuries. Throughout the chase, Officer Ortiz could be heard on video urging Crespo to remain calm. In May 2019, Crespo was indicted by an Essex County grand jury on 6 counts, including first-degree aggravated manslaughter, second-degree aggravated assault, and official misconduct. The trial commenced in April 2023 and went on for over 10 weeks. Prosecutors presented dashboard and body camera footage showing Crespo exiting his patrol car and firing at the fleeing vehicle. They argued that Crespo's use of deadly force was unjustified, as state guidelines permit such force only when there is an imminent threat of death or serious bodily harm. The defense contended that Crespo believed he saw a firearm in the vehicle and acted to protect himself and others. They also highlighted his limited experience and lack of supervision during the incident. On June 23, 2023, the jury convicted Crespo on all charges. He was taken into custody immediately following the verdict. On May 31, 2024, Superior Court Judge Michael Valva sentenced Crespo to 27 years in prison, 20 years for aggravated manslaughter, and 7 years for aggravated assault, to be served consecutively. Additionally, Crespo received concurrent 6-year terms for official misconduct. Under the No Early Release Act, he must serve 85% of his sentence, making him eligible for parole after approximately 22 years and 11 months. During sentencing, Crespo's family, including his mother and sister, pleaded for leniency, stating that Crespo thought that he was doing the right thing. Crespo wept during their statements and stood to briefly address the court. He apologized to the families of the victims and acknowledged the jury's verdict. The judge stated that while Crespo was young and relatively inexperienced, he had been extensively trained and determined that his actions reflected an abhorrent abuse of police power. The judge emphasized the need to abolish the shoot first, ask questions later mentality among law enforcement officers. As of May 2025, Jovanny Crespo is incarcerated at a New Jersey state prison. He has served approximately 1 year of his 27-year sentence and remains ineligible for parole until he has completed nearly 23 years of his term. Number 5. Officer Noe Juarez. Noe Juarez, who was 47 at the time of his conviction in January 2015, was a veteran officer with the Houston Police Department serving for over 20 years. Prior to his law enforcement career, Juarez served as a U.S. Marine and was a Gulf War veteran. In 2009, he was recognized as one of HPD's Officers of the Year for his work with the Central Division Tactical Unit. At the time of his arrest, he was also employed as a security manager at a Houston nightclub. Between 2006 and 2011, Juarez became involved with an international trafficking organization led by brothers Efran and Sergio Grimaldo. The organization, supplied by the Los Zetas cartel in Mexico, distributed thousands of kilograms of hard substances across various U.S. cities, including Jackson, Mississippi, Pensacola, Florida, New York City, Detroit, Michigan, Baltimore, Maryland, Dover, Delaware, and Houma, Louisiana. Juarez's role involved providing sensitive law enforcement information, such as running license plates and sharing police tactics. He also supplied vehicles, body armor, and firearms, including semi-automatic handguns and assault rifles, some of which reached senior cartel leaders in Mexico. In one instance, Juarez was recorded delivering assault rifles while in uniform outside the nightclub where he worked. The investigation was conducted by the Drug Enforcement Administration offices in New Orleans and Houston, the Federal Bureau of Investigation in Houston, and the HPD Internal Affairs Division. Evidence included secretly recorded videos and testimonies from informants. Juarez was arrested in April 2015 following a superseding indictment charging him with conspiracy to distribute 5 kilograms or more cane hydrochloride and conspiracy to possess firearms in furtherance of a drug trafficking offense. On January 15, 2015, Juarez was convicted by a federal jury in the Eastern District of Louisiana on both charges. The conspiracy to distribute hard substance conviction carried a sentence of 10 years to life imprisonment, while the firearms conspiracy charge carried a maximum penalty of 20 years imprisonment. On June 29, 2016, U.S. District Chief Judge sentenced Juarez to 365 months, 30 years and 5 months in federal prison. Following his conviction, Juarez was discharged from the Houston Police Department. As of May 2025, Juarez has served approximately 8 years and 11 months of his sentence. He is currently incarcerated in a federal prison facility. Number 6. Officer Braulio Gonzalez. Braulio Gonzalez, who was 48 at the time of sentencing, served as a lieutenant in the Miami-Dade Police Department. He joined the force in 1999 and was assigned to the Special Response Team, a specialized unit that handled high-risk operations such as hostage situations, warrants, and fugitive apprehensions. Over his nearly 2-decade career, Gonzalez was involved in numerous operations and had been credited by colleagues for his tactical capabilities. However, internal records revealed he had previously faced multiple allegations of domestic misconduct involving former partners. He'd been allowed to keep his job despite multiple allegations that he'd repeatedly beaten and abused his former lovers. According to internal police files, he was cleared of those accusations. In September 2018, Gonzalez was arrested following a report made by a 14-year-old young girl known to him. The girl disclosed to a psychologist and later to a Florida Department of Children and Families interviewer that Gonzalez had touched and abused her inappropriately on multiple occasions while she was between the ages of 8 and 10. She further stated that during the first incident, Gonzalez pointed a firearm at her head and threatened to harm a family member if she spoke about it. A second girl, related to the first victim, also came forward and reported similar abuse. Following these disclosures, Miami-Dade police initiated an arrest, and Gonzalez was taken into custody. The charges against him included armed kidnapping and multiple counts of lewd and lascivious assault. He was held without bond at the Miami-Dade County Jail and remained in custody throughout the legal proceedings. His trial began in early 2023. The 2 young victims testified in court, detailing their experiences. They told the judge that Gonzalez had shattered their lives. The jury deliberated for just 15 minutes before returning a guilty verdict on all counts. Gonzalez's defense attorney maintained that his client was innocent throughout the trial. The defense argued that the alleged incidents did not occur and sought to discredit the testimonies through cross-examination. At the sentencing hearing in March 2023, the presiding judge imposed a life sentence. Prosecutors emphasized Gonzalez's pattern of manipulative and controlling behavior, arguing that his conduct demonstrated he led a double life, one as a police officer and another marked by private abuse. During the hearing, the mother of the victims also addressed the court, stating that Gonzalez had caused harm over many years and had consistently evaded consequences until now. Gonzalez, who was present in court, chose not to speak. He declined to offer an apology or comment on the victims' statements. His attorney requested a 25-year sentence, highlighting Gonzalez's law enforcement service, the lives he had assisted in saving during his career, and supportive testimony from his wife and 2 fellow officers. However, the judge sided with the prosecution's recommendation for life imprisonment. Following the sentencing, Gonzalez was officially discharged from the Miami-Dade Police Department. The department issued no formal statement beyond confirming the termination of his employment. As of May 2025, Gonzalez has served 6 years and 8 months in custody total, including about 4 years and 6 months in pre-sentencing detention and about 2 years and 2 months in post-sentencing incarceration. He is currently incarcerated at the South Florida Reception Center, a state correctional facility in Miami-Dade County. He remains incarcerated and has not been released. He has continued to maintain his innocence through his legal representation. Number 7. Officer Dennis Perkins. Dennis Perkins was 47 at the time of his sentencing in January 2023. He served as a deputy with the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office in Louisiana for 17 years. He held a high-ranking position, including command of the department's Special Response Team. Perkins was married to Cynthia Perkins, a middle school teacher. Both were arrested in 2019, following an investigation into multiple assault crimes involving children. In October 2019, authorities received a tip from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which led to the discovery of explicit images and videos linked to the Perkins residence in Denham Springs. Subsequent investigations uncovered evidence of numerous offenses, including the production of inappropriate videos and images of children, video voyeurism, and the assault of children. One particularly disturbing act involved Dennis Perkins contaminating desserts with bodily fluids, which were then served to unsuspecting individuals. The couple's actions went on undisclosed for several months in 2019, and it involved children under the age of 13. The investigation led by the Louisiana Attorney General's office resulted in the seizure of thousands of images and videos depicting illicit activities. During his arrest, Dennis Perkins attempted to destroy evidence by discarding his cell phone into a body of water. Both Dennis and Cynthia Perkins were taken into custody and faced a combined total of over 150 charges. On January 3, 2023, Dennis Perkins entered a guilty plea to multiple charges, including second-degree assault, battery of a child under the age of 13, video voyeurism, production inappropriate images and videos of children, and mingling harmful substances. As part of the plea agreement, all remaining charges were dismissed. At the sentencing hearing, victims and their families were present. Some gave statements in court. One victim addressed Perkins directly, stating that she hoped he would live in fear for his safety each day in prison. Prosecutors emphasized that the plea deal spared the victims from having to testify in open court. Following his guilty plea, Perkins was immediately terminated from the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office, and he was sentenced to 100 years in prison without the possibility of parole, probation, or appeal. During the sentencing hearing, he expressed remorse, stating, "I'm sorry. It's been more than 3 years living in a box, and it's not about me. I just want to make this statement. Jesus Christ has forgiven me, and I'm grateful for that. And I hope and pray that." Cynthia Perkins, his ex-wife, previously pleaded guilty to related charges and was sentenced to 41 years. She even agreed to testify against Dennis Perkins if the case had proceeded to trial. Additionally, in December of 2021, Melanie Curtin, the ex-lover of Dennis Perkins, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole after being found guilty of aggravated assault and video voyeurism in the 2014 assault of an unconscious woman. As of May 2025, Dennis Perkins is incarcerated in a Louisiana state prison, serving his 100-year sentence. He has served approximately 2 years and 4 months of his term. Given the nature of his sentence, he is not eligible for parole or early release and is expected to remain in custody for the remainder of his life. Number 1. Officer Michael Valva. In the early hours of January 17, 2020, emergency responders arrived at a residence in Center Moriches, Long Island, following a 911 call from Michael Valva, a 45-year-old former NYPD officer. Valva reported that his 8-year-old son, Thomas, had fallen on his way to the bus, and he banged his head and lost consciousness. He also reported that he was giving him CPR, trying to revive him at the time of the call. Upon arrival, paramedics found Thomas unresponsive, with a body temperature of 76.1 degrees Fahrenheit, indicating severe hypothermia. Despite resuscitation efforts, Thomas was pronounced dead at the hospital. Before the incident, Valva and his 3 sons lived with his fiancée Angela Polina and her 3 daughters. Subsequent investigations unveiled a harrowing pattern of abuse. Evidence, including home surveillance footage, revealed that Thomas and his brother Anthony, both diagnosed with autism, were subjected to prolonged mistreatment. They were forced to sleep in an unheated garage without access to basic necessities. On the day of the tragic incident, temperatures had gone below freezing, and Thomas and his brother Anthony had spent the night in the garage of their home, with no heat, no bathroom access, no mattress, and no blankets. After waking up on the cold cement floor of the garage, Thomas had an accident and soiled his pants. When their father, Michael Valva, arrived where they were, he was seen on a video screaming at Thomas, forcing him outside and hosing him down with cold water, leading to him collapsing. Despite Thomas's evident distress, Valva delayed seeking medical assistance for over an hour. He never called 911 immediately. These children's abuse extended beyond the fatal incident. School officials testified that both boys often arrive at school hungry, cold, and in soiled clothing almost every day. They were often observed scavenging for food and displaying signs of physical neglect. Valva was arrested and charged with second-degree murder and multiple counts of endangering the welfare of a child. His fiancée, Angela Polina, was also arrested and faced similar charges. During the trial, Valva's defense highlighted his law enforcement background, but the prosecution emphasized the severity and duration of the abuse. In December 2022, Valva was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. The Suffolk County District Attorney described the treatment of Thomas and his brother as nothing short of evil. His wife was also sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. As of April 2025, Michael Valva has served approximately 2 years and 4 months of his sentence. He is incarcerated in a New York State correctional facility. His earliest possible release date, if he gets considered for parole, would be in 2047, when he would be 68 years old. Number 2, Officer Daniel Holtzclaw. In the early morning of June 18, 2014, after a full-day shift in northeast Oklahoma, 57-year-old Jovanny Ligens was driving home when she was stopped by 39-year-old Officer Daniel Holtzclaw. The officer had just closed from work and was driving home in his patrol vehicle. When he made the traffic stop, he logged off his patrol car computer and never notified his dispatch team to run a record on the woman he had stopped. Daniel had been lurking around that area, looking for victims, especially vulnerable women to assault. He approached Jovanny, and after numerous back-and-forth interrogations, he reportedly asked her to pull down her underwear and went ahead to force her into carrying out an oral sodomy act on him in the back of his patrol vehicle. Jovanny begged him to stop, but he refused until he was done. While the act was happening, She tried not to look at his badge, as there was a possibility that he could have shot her dead if she knew his name. After the incident, Jovanny went to the police station and filed a report. When Officer Daniel resumed work the next day, he was taken in and questioned by 2 detectives, Kim Davis and Rocky Gregory. He denied all accusations and feigned ignorance of the crimes. The detective took his swabs for DNA tests, and he was stripped of all his police accessories, including his uniforms and badges, and was placed on paid administrative leave. He was later released due to no clear evidence against him. They investigated further into his case and came across numerous pieces of evidence, including 16 counts of assault reports leveled against him. They also came across a case similar to that of Jovanny that was not taken seriously when reported. He also drove the female victim to a secluded area and forced her to perform an oral act on him. The detectives contacted the victim, and she gave them details that they matched and connected with Officer Daniel. During the investigation, over 13 women came forward to testify against him. On August 21, 2014, Daniel was arrested just a few weeks after Jovanny's courageous police report, and he was charged with multiple assault counts. Investigators revealed that Daniel, who was born in Guam, joined the Oklahoma City Police Department and patrolled the northeast sector of the city, an area predominantly inhabited by African American residents. Between December 2013 and June 2014, he used the authority of his uniform and badge to prey on vulnerable women, many of whom had prior criminal records or were involved in substance use, believing they would be less likely to report his misconduct. He would routinely carry out background checks on different women to know which of them suited his list of victims. Daniel's ways of operation involved stopping women under the guise of routine checks. Then he would force them into carrying out intimate acts by threatening to arrest them or reminding them of their criminal histories. His victims ranged in age from 17 to 57. In December 2015, after a month-long trial, Daniel was convicted on 18 of 36 counts, including 4 counts of first-degree assault, battery, and forcible oral sodomy. During his trial, a victim recounted how he forced her into carrying out the act on him while she was handcuffed in the hospital after she was arrested for substance abuse. She believed that no one would believe her if she had reported stating that all policemen would always work together. The jury recommended a sentence totaling 263 years. On January 21, 2016, the judge sentenced Daniel to 263 years in prison, effectively ensuring he would spend the rest of his life incarcerated. His appeals have been consistently denied. In 2019, the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals upheld his convictions and sentence, rejecting claims of prosecutorial misconduct and insufficient evidence. His family continues to assert his innocence and has indicated plans to pursue further appeals in federal court, a process that could extend over several years. As of April 2025, he has served approximately 9 years of his sentence. He is currently incarcerated at the Lexington Assessment and Reception Center in Oklahoma. Number 3, Officer Bobby Cutts, Jr. On June 14, 2007, Jessie Marie Davis, a 26-year-old woman who was 9 months pregnant, vanished from her home in Lake Township, Ohio. She was last seen shopping at a local grocery shop. Her mother, who was the last person she spoke with, visited her home the next day and discovered just her 2-year-old son, Blake, alone in the house. She noticed the home settings and saw signs of struggle, including overturned furniture and bleach stains. The 2-year-old boy reportedly told her that his mommy broke the table, and his mommy was inside the rug, prompting an immediate and extensive search for Jessie. Many individuals, including members of Texas EquuSearch, volunteered to search for the missing lady. At the time of the incident, Jessie and 26-year-old Officer Bobby Lee Cutts Jr. were in a relationship. Officer Bobby was the father of Blake, as well as the unborn child she was carrying. The investigation for her whereabouts quickly focused on Officer Bobby. Initially, he denied involvement or knowing where his girlfriend was, but on June 23, 2007, he led authorities to Jessie's body in a wooded area of Hampton Hills Metro Park. She had been wrapped in a comforter and left in the park. Officer Bobby was arrested and charged with the murders of Jessie and her unborn daughter, whom she had planned to name Chloe. During his trial, which began on February 4, 2008, he testified that he accidentally murdered Jessie during an argument, claiming he elbowed her in the throat during a struggle. He admitted to panicking, attempting to revive her, and then decided to dispose her body with the help of his friend, Maisha Farrell. On February 15, 2008, the jury found Bobby guilty of the aggravated murder of his unborn child, the murder of his girlfriend, aggravated burglary, gross abuse of a corpse, and child endangerment. On February 27, 2008, he was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. His accomplice, Farrell, pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice and complicity to gross abuse of a corpse, and she was sentenced to 2 years in prison. As of April 2025, Bobby has served approximately 17 years of his sentence, and he is incarcerated at the Marion Correctional Institution in Ohio. Number 4, Officer Matthew Kinne. On May 19, 2019, 40-year-old Officer Matthew Kinne, a former Oxford police officer, drove his marked patrol car while he was off duty to Oxford, Mississippi, to the home of 32-year-old Dominique Clayton with the intention to murder her. He entered through an unlocked door and found Clayton asleep. He stepped out and went back to his vehicle to retrieve his department-issued 9mm Glock firearm. When he got back, he shot her once in the back of the head. After the murder, Kinne then returned to the Oxford Police Department's horse barn, where he left his phone to create an alibi and deceive investigators. He also sent Clayton a text message to suggest she was still alive. Clayton's 8-year-old son discovered her body the following morning. Investigators quickly identified Kinne as a suspect due to his romantic involvement with Clayton. He was arrested on May 20, 2019, and fired from the Oxford Police Department shortly thereafter. He admitted to having an affair with Miss Clayton, but denied knowing who had murdered her. Surveillance footage released confirmed his presence at the scene. After a lot of evidence was leveled against him, he confessed to the murder during a subsequent interrogation. During the interrogation, it was discovered that Kinne, who was legally married and the victim had been in a 1-year relationship. He provided her with money and other benefits, and even bought a car for her. Reports say he wanted to end the relationship, but Miss Clayton threatened to tell his wife about their secret affairs, and he decided to murder her. Though the victim's family believed that it was Miss Clayton who tried to break off the relationship but couldn't. In August 2019, he was indicted on capital murder charges. To avoid the death penalty, Kinne pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. A federal judge awarded $2.2 million in damages to Clayton's 4 children, citing Kinne's actions as intentional, wanton, willful, and reckless. The judgment included $1.2 million in compensatory damages and $1 million in punitive damages. As of April 2025, Kinne has served approximately 5 years and 11 months of his life sentence. He is incarcerated in a Mississippi State prison. Number 5, Officer Wayne Couzens. On the evening of March 3, 2021, 33-year-old Sarah Everard disappeared while walking home. At around 9 p.m. that day, Sarah left a friend's house in Clapham, South London. She walked along the A205 South Circular Road across the Common on her way to her Brixton Hill home. While walking, she called and spoke to her boyfriend on her phone for about 15 minutes and agreed to meet him the next day. A police dash camera captured her movements at this time as she walked on Poinders Road. A few minutes later, she was stopped by 49-year-old former Metropolitan Police Officer Wayne Couzens. Officer Couzens had already closed from his work that day and was driving a vehicle he had rented a few days earlier. After he stopped Sarah, he showed her his police warrant card before handcuffing her. Reports say that he probably claimed that he was arresting her for breaching COVID-19 guidelines. CCTV camera showed that after handcuffing her, he asked her into the vehicle and drove to Kent. Later that night, the camera also captured him driving her to a secluded area in Dover after he had transferred to his personal car. Around midnight, he assaulted and murdered her using his police duty belt. After the murder, he purchased some drinks from a Dover petrol station and then drove to Hodes Wood, where he had private land property, and kept Sarah's body, and drove back to Dover, where he switched back to his rental car and returned it. After returning the car, he disposed Sarah's phone and other items. Later that day, Sarah's boyfriend tried calling her as they agreed to meet up but couldn't reach her. After many failed trials, he reported her missing to the police station. Days after the murder, in a bid to cover up his tracks, Couzens reportedly told his senior colleagues that he was suffering from stress and would no longer be able to carry his firearm. After this, he purchased petrol and 2 large builder's bags and went home. He returned to his landed property where he hid Sarah's body and set it on fire. Afterwards, he packed the remains inside the bag and disposed it. The following day, he reported himself ill from work, handing in his equipment, including his police belt and handcuffs. Sarah's disappearance sparked widespread concern and a significant police investigation. Days later, her remains were discovered in a wooded area near Ashford, Kent, a few miles from Couzens's land property. After searching properly, the investigation led to the arrest of Wayne Couzens. Initially, during the interrogation, he claimed that he did not recognize Sarah, but later he confessed that a gang demanded that he deliver another girl after he underpaid a street girl who rendered sexual services to him, but that was a lie. The investigation found no evidence of a gang, and his story was full of holes. It was a made-up excuse. An inquiry led by Lady Elish Angiolini found that Couzens had a history of indecent exposure incidents that were not adequately investigated. He had been reported for indecent exposure just days before Sarah's murder, but no action was taken at the time. The inquiry concluded that these missed opportunities allowed Couzens to continue his predatory behavior unchecked. On September 30th, 2021, after hours of trial, Wayne Couzens was sentenced to a whole life prison term for the kidnapping, assault, and murder of Sarah Everard. This means he will spend the rest of his life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge described the case as devastating, tragic, and wholly brutal, emphasizing the abuse of his position as a police officer to commit these crimes. He kidnapped, assaulted, and murdered Sarah Everard for his own selfish sexual gratification. Not because someone forced him to, not because he was mentally ill, but because he chose to do it. In addition to the life sentence, Couzens was later sentenced to 19 months in prison for 3 counts of indecent exposure, which occurred before Sarah's murder. These sentences are to be served concurrently with his life sentence. As of April 2025, Couzens has served approximately 3.5 years of his sentence and remains incarcerated at HMP Frankland, a high-security prison in County Durham, England. Number 6. Officer David Carrick. For nearly 2 decades, 48-year-old David Carrick, a serving officer in the Metropolitan Police, carried out a series of heinous sexual offenses against multiple women. He was popularly known as a serial offender. His position of authority allowed him to exploit and intimidate his victims, committing at least 85 serious offenses, including 48 assaults against women. He carried out most of these assaults in his Hertfordshire home, where he lived, and all took place while he was still a serving officer. His crimes, which spanned from 2003 to 2020, remained unchecked despite multiple allegations against him over the years. Carrick remained in his role, highlighting significant shortcomings within the police force. Carrick joined the Metropolitan Police in 2001 and was assigned to the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Command. Over the years, he used his authority to manipulate and control his victims. He met many of his victims through dating apps, presenting himself as a trustworthy officer. Once in a relationship, he subjected them to degrading acts such as false imprisonment, assault, and forceful intimate relations. Some victims were locked in a cupboard under the stairs, others were whipped with belts, and some were subjected to more inhumane treatments. He controlled various aspects of their lives, dictating what they wore, ate, and who they could communicate with. In some instances, he held a gun to a woman's head during the assault. Carrick's actions were calculated and manipulative, often using his status as a police officer to silence his victims after each attack. Despite multiple allegations over the years, he continued work as a police officer. He came to the attention of police over 9 separate incidents between 2000 and 2021. However, these were not adequately investigated, allowing him to continue his predatory behavior. In 2016, a complaint was mishandled, leading to Carrick being re-vetted by the Met. During the investigation, he escalated his offenses. In 2021, a woman came forward with allegations of assault, and he was arrested. Subsequent investigations uncovered the deep nature of his crimes and how many years it has been going on undetected. Over 12 women victims came forward to testify against him. In February 2023, he pleaded guilty to 49 charges against 12 women, resulting in 36 life sentences. The judge then ordered that he serve a minimum of 30 years before being eligible for parole. During his trial, Carrick showed no emotion as he was sentenced, and the judge highlighted his lack of remorse and the devastating impact of his actions on his victims. As of April 2025, Carrick has served approximately 2 years of his sentence. He will not be eligible for parole until at least 2053, at which point he will be 76 years old. He is currently incarcerated in a UK prison. Number 7. Officer Nicholas Tartaglione. In the early hours of April 11, 2016, Nicholas Tartaglione, a 56-year-old former police officer from Briarcliff Manor, New York, orchestrated a brutal attack that led to the deaths of 4 individuals over a substance-related dispute. Nicholas, who was a bodybuilder and had been illegally selling steroids, suspected Martin Luna of stealing approximately $250,000 intended for a hard substance purchase. In a bid to avenge and get back his money, he set up a meeting with Luna. He lured him to the Liquid Lounge, a bar in Chester owned by his brother. Unaware that the meeting was a setup, Luna arrived at the meeting place accompanied by his nephews, Miguel Luna, his niece's husband, Urbano Santiago, and a family friend, Hector Gutierrez. Immediately after arriving, their meeting quickly turned deadly. Nicholas and his associates kidnapped all 4 men. Martin Luna was taken to Nicola's property in Otisville, where he was restrained, beaten for over an hour, and ultimately murdered with a zip tie. The other 3 men were forced to witness Luna's murder before they were executed with single gunshots to the back of the head. Their bodies were buried in a shallow grave on Nicholas's rented property. The victims remained missing until December 2016, when the FBI's Hudson Valley Safe Streets Task Force discovered the mass grave. Nicholas was arrested shortly thereafter and charged with multiple counts, including murder, kidnapping resulting in death, kidnapping conspiracy, and narcotics conspiracy. He claimed that he was innocent and didn't know about the incident, as he was only a businessman who ran an animal rescue farm. During the investigation, one of his colleagues fatally shot himself as the FBI tried to arrest him. Another accomplice, Joseph Biggs, testified against him and was sentenced to 16 years in prison after pleading guilty. Nicholas was convicted in April 2023 and sentenced in June 2024 to 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. his case drew additional attention due to his brief time as a cellmate of the popular Jeffrey Epstein in 2019. Although he was not in the cell at the time of Epstein's death, he was considered a significant witness in the investigation. As of April 2025, he has served approximately 10 months of his life sentence. Currently, Nicholas Tartaglione is incarcerated in a federal prison. Number 8. Officer Henry Solis. On the evening of March 13, 2015, a fight broke out between 23-year-old Salome Rodriguez Jr., a truck driver, and 27-year-old Henry Solis, a former probationary Los Angeles Police Department officer who was off duty at that time. The incident occurred outside a bar in Pomona, east of Los Angeles, after a little altercation between the two. As the incident escalated, Solis pursued Rodriguez, who was then fleeing the scene on foot, and fatally shot him multiple times until he died. After the shooting, Solis fled the country and went to Mexico with the help of his father, who dropped him off across the U.S.-Mexico border. CCTV cameras captured both of them walking through the border. After fleeing, he became a fugitive and was placed on the FBI's most wanted list, and a manhunt was carried out in search for him. During this period, he was also fired from his police work. In May 2015, after 2 months of being on the run, Solis was apprehended in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, where he was staying with some of his relatives, and he was extradited to the United States to face charges. During his trial, his defense attorneys argued that Solis acted in self-defense in the fatal shooting, but his claims were rejected. He also indicated that Solis was a good human who had spent years serving his country. While reading the impact statement, the family of the victim expressed how his decision that day changed the course of their life. Rodriguez's father stated that he took his son's life with no mercy, but he's now seeking mercy. After the trial, Solis was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 40 years to life in prison. The victim's family expressed that they wanted him to be convicted of first-degree murder, but they were pleased with his second-degree murder conviction. His father, Victor, was also convicted by a federal jury in El Paso for lying to the FBI about helping his son escape. He was sentenced to 3 years probation and fined $1,000. As of April 2025, Henry Solis has served approximately 9 years of his sentence, and he is currently incarcerated in a California state prison. Number 9. Officer Michael Neely. 50-year-old Michael Neely was a former police officer with the Manford Police Department in Oklahoma. In November 2019, he and his superior, Police Chief Lucky Miller, traveled to Pensacola Beach, Florida, to attend a law enforcement conference. They shared a hotel room at the Hilton Hotel during their stay. On the evening of November 10, 2019, hotel guests reported loud noises coming from Neely and Miller's room. Witnesses described hearing laughter, yelling, and a voice repeatedly shouting, "Stop it, Mike!" The commotion escalated before suddenly ceasing. A maintenance worker, responding to noise complaints, entered the room and found Neely on top of Miller, who was lying motionless on the floor. They called the police to intervene. Upon arrival, the deputies pulled Neely off Miller and observed that Miller had no pulse and exhibited signs of a severe beating, including a swollen right eye. Neely was taken to Sacred Heart Hospital for treatment of injuries to his nose and lip, which he sustained after hitting his head on the floor while he was pulled off of Miller. His right hand was also swollen and red. The medical examiner concluded that Miller died from blunt force trauma to the head and asphyxiation due to strangulation and smothering. Prosecutors noted that at least one of the blows delivered by Neely had the impact equivalent to a car accident. During the trial in Escambia County, Florida, Neely's defense argued that he was so intoxicated that he accidentally fell onto Miller and was unable to get off due to his drunken state at the time of the crime. Neely declined to testify in his defense. In March 2021, a jury found him guilty of second-degree murder. On April 29, 2021, He was sentenced to life in prison, with credit for 536 days already served. The motive behind the altercation remains unclear, though it occurred during an alcohol-fueled dispute. The incident shocked the community, as both men were known to be friendly and respected law enforcement officers. As of April 2025, Neely has served approximately 5 years and 5 months of his life sentence. Number 10, Officer Miles Bryant. On the evening of July 26, 2022, 16-year-old Susana Morales went missing after informing her mother that she was walking home from a friend's residence in Norcross. She never made it home that day. For several months, she was never found, and missing person posters were made to help facilitate the search. Her skeletal remains were discovered 6 months later by Matthew Gilbert, a man who was off-roading in a wooded area near Dacula, approximately 20 miles from her last known location. None of her clothing or personal items were found. Dental records and DNA evidence identified the remains as being the 16-year-old girl, and medical examination suggested that she might have been murdered the same day of her disappearance, though they were unable to determine how she died due to the condition of her remains. Some suggested that she was intoxicated with a substance, as there was no way she could have followed or done anything with her kidnapper if she was conscious. Investigations revealed that Miles Bryant, a 22-year-old former Doraville police officer who lived near the road to Susana's home, abducted her, discarded her phone, and transported her to the remote location where he attempted to assault her, murdered her, and left her body where it was later found. Initially, Bryant was arrested on suspicion of assault, murder, and other offenses, and was denied bail by the judge, stating that he was a threat to the community. After being held in custody for the offenses, he was fired from his police job. During the investigation, it was revealed that Bryant had no previous relationship with the victim. He just thought she would be a good target. Bryant was charged, and following his trial, evidence presented included incriminating internet searches on Bryant's mobile devices, such as inquiries about how long it takes for a body to decompose and how an identification can be verified through dental records. Additionally, a firearm registered to Bryant was located near the victim's remains. He had previously reported this weapon stolen shortly after her disappearance. During the trial, Bryant showed little or no remorse as the victim's family read out their impact statement with tears in their eyes. He reportedly stated, "I just want to apologize to everybody. To the victim's family, that's it." A lot of individuals, including his ex-girlfriend, was called to testify. Also, his longtime friend testified that months after the incident, Bryant was caught on camera stalking her and showed up uninvited to her home. Bryant's former cellmate also testified that Bryant told him that he would not be charged since they had nothing against him, stating that there was no blood or fluid to use to link him to the murder. After the whole trial, the jury found Bryant guilty of malice murder, felony murder, kidnapping, and filing a false report of a crime. He was acquitted on the charge of attempted assault. The presiding judge sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 12 months for the false report. The victim's family thanked the judge for giving out a befitting sentence, though none of it could bring back their loved one. As of April 2025, Bryant has served approximately 10 months of his life sentence. He is currently incarcerated at the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification State Prison in Jackson, Georgia. Number 11, Officer Kenneth Bluew. On the evening of August 30th, 2011, Jennifer Webb, a 32-year-old woman who was 8 months pregnant, was found deceased in her car near a drainage ditch in Buena Vista Township, Michigan. The scene was staged to appear as self-harm, with Webb's body hanging from an extension cord tied to the roof rack of her vehicle. However, forensic analysis revealed that she had died from manual strangulation and not hanging. The investigation quickly focused on 37-year-old Kenneth T. Bluew, a former officer with the Buena Vista Township Police Department in Michigan and the father of Webb's unborn child. Evidence against Bluew was substantial. DNA and fingerprints linked him to the crime scene, and his behavior during the investigation raised suspicions. It was determined that Bluew had murdered Webb to avoid the personal and professional consequences of their relationship becoming public. He was married at the time he got Webb pregnant. He then attempted to cover up the crime by making it look like Miss Webb decided to do it to herself. In November 2012, Bluew was convicted of first-degree premeditated murder, assault of a pregnant individual with intent to cause miscarriage, and 2 counts of possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. During the trial, the victim's mother read her impact statement, stating that Bluew had broken all the trust of everyone who once believed in him, and reportedly told him that his actions would haunt him for the rest of his life in his prison cage. During his trial also, his wife filed for a divorce. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for the murder conviction, 65 to 100 years for the assault conviction, and 2 years for each of the firearm convictions. These sentences were to be served concurrently. As of April 2025, Kenneth Bluew has served approximately 12 years of his sentence. He is currently incarcerated at the Alger Correctional Facility in Munising, Michigan. Number 12, Officer Aaron Dean. In the early hours of October 12, 2019, in the Fort Worth neighborhood, 28-year-old Atatiana Jefferson, who was inside her home, was fatally shot through her bedroom window by a police officer conducting a welfare check. The incident raised profound questions about police conduct, accountability, and the sanctity of one's home. Atatiana Jefferson was a dedicated pre-med graduate from Xavier University, known for her intelligence and compassion. She had moved back to Fort Worth to care for her ailing mother and was deeply involved in her community. On the night of the incident, she was playing video games with her 8-year-old nephew, Zion. They had left their front door open to air out smoke from burnt hamburgers. A concerned neighbor noticed the open door and called a non-emergency police line, prompting officers to check on the residents. Responding to the call around 2:30 a.m., Officer Aaron Dean, a 34-year-old white male who had joined the Fort Worth Police Department 6 months earlier, approached the house with his partner, Officer Carol Darch. Without announcing their presence, they entered the backyard of Jefferson's residence, and upon seeing movement through a window, perceiving a threat, Officer Dean shouted for Jefferson to show her hands, and within seconds, fired a single shot through the window, striking her. Jefferson had retrieved her legally owned firearm, likely believing there was an intruder outside. Her nephew Zion witnessed the entire event. Jefferson died at the scene. The body camera footage released by the police showed the rapid sequence of events, leading to public outcry. 2 days after the shooting, Dean resigned from the force, just before his arrest on the murder charge. He was released on a $200,000 bond pending trial. The trial faced multiple delays due to legal complications and the COVID-19 pandemic. When it commenced in December 2022, the prosecution argued that Dean acted recklessly, failing to identify himself as a police officer and not giving Jefferson a chance to comply. The defense contended that Dean believed he was confronting a burglar and acted in self-defense upon seeing a firearm. During the trial, the nephew testified that her aunt took her firearm from her purse and walked to the window holding it at her side while looking out the window before she was shot. The other officer who was at the scene on the day of the event indicated that they could only see Jefferson's face from the window before the gunshot was fired. The jury found Dean guilty of manslaughter, a lesser charge than murder, acknowledging the lack of intent but recognizing the negligence. During the trial, Jefferson's sisters recounted how good their sister was and how she was just enjoying her life in her home, where no one would have expected her life to be in danger, especially not in the hands of a civil servant who had taken the oath to serve and protect. On December 20th, 2022, Dean was sentenced to 11 years, 10 months, and 12 days in prison. The sentence's length symbolically matched the age of Zion, the little nephew who witnessed the whole tragic incident, and the date of the incident. As of April 2025, Dean has served approximately 2 years and 4 months of his sentence. He is currently incarcerated in a Texas state prison and may be eligible for parole after serving half of his sentence around mid-2028. At that time, he will be approximately 41 years old. Number 13, Officer Roy Oliver. On the evening of April 29, 2017, a group of teenagers, including 15-year-old Jordan Edwards, attended a house party in Balk Springs, Texas. Around 11 p.m., as the gathering was winding down, someone in the neighborhood sent a 911 call to give reports of underage children drinking. This led to a prompt response from 2 police officers, Officer Roy Oliver and his partner, Officer Tyler Gross. Upon their arrival to the party, the 2 officers entered the residence to locate the homeowner. While inside, they heard what they believed to be gunshots outside. The sound of the gunshots created panic, and many attendees fled the party. Jordan Edwards, his elder brother, and his companions entered their vehicle to leave. Jordan's brother was the one driving the car. Officer Gross approached the car, breaking the passenger side window in an attempt to stop it. Immediately, Officer Oliver retrieved his patrol rifle and fired multiple rounds into the vehicle, striking Jordan in the head. He was rushed to the nearby hospital and was pronounced dead. The officers also took his elder brother to the station for questioning. He was held at the police station till the next day. During the investigation of the incident, the Balk Springs Police Department stated that the vehicle the children were driving was reversing aggressively toward the officers, prompting the use of lethal force. However, body camera footage later revealed that the car was moving away from the officers, contradicting earlier claims. This discrepancy led to the firing of Officer Oliver from the police department after being placed on administrative leave. The Dallas Police Department still investigated the shooting, and days later, a warrant was issued for Officer Oliver's arrest. A few days later, he turned himself in to the police, and later that day, he got released after bailing himself with $300,000. Months after his bail, the case proceeded to trial in Dallas County, marking a rare instance where a police officer was charged with murder for an on-duty shooting. During the trial, family and friends recounted how lovely Jordan Edwards was. He was described as a beacon of positivity and ambition. He was remembered by his school principal as always smiling and by his football coach as a coach's dream. Jordan had aspirations that extended beyond the football field. His untimely death not only robbed his family of a beloved son, but also deprived the community of a young man who was on his way to making a significant contribution. On August 28, 2018, the jury found Roy Oliver guilty of murder. The following day, he was sentenced to 15 years in prison, though the prosecutors demanded for him to serve 60 years behind bars. This conviction was significant, as it was the first murder conviction of a police officer in Dallas County in over 40 years. As of April 2025, Roy Oliver has served approximately 6.5 years of his 15-year sentence. He is incarcerated at the James J. H. Byrd Unit in Huntsville, Texas. There's a possibility that he may be released soon, having served half of his sentence. Number 14, Officer Marcus Eberhardt. On April 11, 2014, in East Point, Georgia, former Police Sergeant Marcus Eberhardt and his partner, Corporal Howard Weems, responded to a domestic disturbance call. Upon their arrival, they encountered 24-year-old Gregory Towns outside his girlfriend's residence. On seeing the police officers, Towns decided to flee the scene. He was running until he stopped a bit to catch his breath, but he was apprehended by the officers and was handcuffed and ordered to walk to their patrol vehicle. When Towns, who was overweight and had underlying health conditions, struggled to comply due to exhaustion, the officers used their tasers on him multiple times. Despite being handcuffed and unarmed, Towns was shocked with the taser at least 14 times over a 30-minute period. In between those periods of torture, Towns begged numerous times for them to stop so he could catch his breath, but they refused. He eventually became unresponsive, and when the paramedics arrived, they pronounced him dead at the scene. An autopsy revealed that Towns died from hypertensive cardiovascular disease caused by physical exertion and conducted electrical stimulation. The excessive use of the taser, particularly in drive-stun mode, was a significant contributing factor to his death. In December 2016, Marcus Eberhardt was convicted of felony murder, aggravated assault, and violation of oath by a public officer. During his trial, Towns' girlfriend explained that he regretted ever calling the police that day on his boyfriend, stating that she would no longer put her trust in the police department or even the court of justice again. Officer Howard Weems also expressed deep remorse for his actions and deeply apologized to the victim's family. He was convicted of involuntary manslaughter, reckless conduct, and violation of oath by a public officer. He received a 5-year sentence, with 18 months to serve in prison and the remainder on probation. Weems was sentenced under first offender status, meaning his felony charges could be dropped upon successful completion of his sentence. Officer Marcus Eberhardt was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. As of April 2025, Eberhardt, currently incarcerated in a Georgia state prison, has served approximately 8 years and 4 months of his sentence. Towns' family also settled a civil lawsuit with the city of East Point for $1 million, the maximum allowed by the city's insurance policy. Officer Derek Chauvin. On May 25, 2020, a bystander's cell phone captured a harrowing scene on a Minneapolis street. A white police officer knelt on the neck of George Floyd, a 46-year-old black man, for over 9 minutes. He repeatedly cried out for help, stating that he couldn't breathe. All his pleas went unheeded until he couldn't plead again. On the day of the incident, 4 police officers responded to a call from the Cup Foods grocery store employee, who suspected that Floyd had used a counterfeit $20 bill to make payments at their convenience store. Among the 4 officers who responded was 45-year-old Derek Chauvin, a member of the Minneapolis Police Department with over 19 years of service. In those years, he had accumulated over 18 severe complaints against him. Upon their arrival at the convenience store, they found Floyd sitting in a nearby vehicle. They confronted him and forcefully removed him from the car. The CCTV cameras did not show Floyd resisting arrest or trying to struggle with them. Officer Chauvin restrained Floyd on the ground, pressing his knee into Floyd's neck while he was still handcuffed and lying face down on the street. 2 other officers joined in restraining him, while the last officer prevented people from interfering. Floyd cried out for help many times, stating that he couldn't breathe, and even called out to his mother for help. Despite Floyd's cries for help and bystanders' objections, Chauvin maintained the pressure until paramedics arrived, and Floyd was pronounced dead. An autopsy revealed that he died from cardiopulmonary arrest due to prolonged asphyxiation. The video of Floyd's death quickly went viral, leading to Chauvin's arrest days later. In April 2021, after a highly publicized trial, a jury found Chauvin guilty of second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. He pleaded guilty to federal charges of violating George Floyd's civil rights. In June 2021, Judge Peter Cahill sentenced him to 22.5 years in prison, citing his abuse of authority and the particular cruelty shown to Floyd. Additionally, he admitted to a separate 2017 incident where he used excessive force on a 14-year-old boy. In July 2022, a federal judge sentenced him to 21 years in prison for the crime, to be served concurrently with his state sentence. After the verdict, he was transferred to a federal facility in Tucson, Arizona. Months after being transferred to the prison, he was attacked and stabbed 22 times by a fellow inmate, John Tucker, who was a former member of a Mexican mafia gang. Tucker said he had considered carrying out the act months ago and would have murdered him immediately, if not for the quick response from the prison guards. He told FBI agents that he attacked Chauvin on a Black Friday as a symbolic connection to the Black Lives Matter movement. Following the attack, Chauvin was transferred to a low-security federal prison in Big Spring, Texas, for his safety. As of April 2025, Derek Chauvin has served nearly 4 years of his sentence. Given the concurrent nature of his state and federal sentences, he is projected to be released in 2037 at the age of 61. George Floyd's family was also given $27 million as a settlement to resolve a wrongful death lawsuit. Officer Newman K. Raja. In the early hours of October 18, 2015, a routine drive home turned fatal for 31-year-old Corey Jones, a housing inspector and a church drummer at the Bible Church of God in Boynton Beach, Florida, where his grandfather is a bishop. He also performed with the Future Presidents band group. On the night of the incident, he had just concluded a project in Jupiter, Florida, and was driving home when his vehicle broke down. He made a call to his friends and family. His brother offered to come pick him up, but he refused, indicating that he needed his car to run an errand the next morning in church. His bandmate also came to assist, but they couldn't get the car running, so he left after Jones decided to call a tow truck. He was still on the phone. While waiting for roadside assistance, when he was confronted by Officer Newman Raja, a 38-year-old officer who had joined the Palm Beach Gardens Police Department a few months earlier after serving with the Atlantis Police Department. On the night of the incident, Raja was conducting surveillance in an unmarked van, dressed in civilian clothes. He was also not wearing a body camera, and his vehicle did not have a dash cam. Around 3:15 a.m., Raja approached Jones' disabled car without identifying himself as a police officer. He confronted him. Jones, who was still on the phone with the roadside assistance, was holding a firearm that he had legally purchased for personal protection. Officer Raja asked him if he was good, and Jones responded affirmatively. Noticing some movement, Officer Raja then shouted for Jones to raise his hands. Jones replied, "Hold on," and within a few seconds, multiple gunshots were heard. At the sound of a gunshot, Jones started running to save his life, but Officer Raja fired 3 more shots. The last 3 shots struck Jones, resulting in his death. After the incident, the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, with assistance from the FBI, conducted an investigation. Officer Raja was arrested and his bail was set for $250,000. After making bail, Raja was released from the Palm Beach County Jail and placed under house arrest. A variety of conditions of pre-trial release, including GPS monitoring and surrender of Raja's passport, were imposed. He was put on administrative leave, and subsequently, his employment was terminated. Evidence revealed that Raja had not identified himself as law enforcement and had acted aggressively, leading Jones to believe he was being attacked. Jones' firearm was also found at the scene, undischarged. Forensic evidence indicated that Jones had attempted to flee, discarding his weapon, and was shot in the back. To all the accusations, Raja claimed self-defense, stating that Jones had pointed his firearm at him and also stated that he had called 911 before shooting. However, on January 17, 2017, audio evidence was released to the public. The recording was from Jones' call to the roadside assistance, and it captured all the details that happened that night. The public contradicted Raja's account, and it was also confirmed that the 911 call was made after he shot Jones. Officer Raja was charged with manslaughter by culpable negligence and attempted first-degree murder. During the trial in March 2019, Raja's defense claimed he acted in self-defense, believing Jones posed a threat. However, their claim didn't hold. On March 7, 2019, after an 8-day trial, he was found guilty on both charges. On April 25, 2019, Judge Joseph Marks sentenced him to 25 years in prison for each charge, to be served concurrently. This marked the first conviction of a Florida police officer for an on-duty shooting in over 30 years. He is currently incarcerated at the Wakulla Correctional Institution in Crawfordville, Florida. As of April 2025, Raja has served 6 years of his sentence. Given the nature of his conviction, he is scheduled for parole in 2044 when he will be 63 years old. Officer Andrew Bluew. On June 10, 2022, 22-year-old Christian Glass was driving alone when his vehicle went off the road and got stuck in dirt near Silver Plume, Colorado. Unable to get it back on the road, he called 911 emergency services for help. During the call, Glass exhibited signs of a mental health crisis, expressing paranoia and fear. He told the 911 operator that he would love her to be on the line with him since he was frightened and would not be fine on his own. He also told the operator that he was worried and afraid of skinwalkers. When the officers arrived, including Deputy Andrew Bluew, they asked Glass to get out of the car with their hands on their guns. Glass refused, saying that he was scared. Glass then told the officers he had a geology knife in the car. He offered to throw it out of the window in front of the officers, but they told him not to. He then kept the knife away and kept his hands where the officers could see it. Over the course of approximately 70 minutes, officers attempted to persuade Glass to leave the car, but he said the car was the only place he felt safe. He was seen praying and blowing out kisses from inside his car to the officers. As the night was getting darker and Glass was still inside his car, Officer Bluew smashed the front window of the car. Another officer stood on top of his car, shining a flashlight on him. Eventually, they broke a window and tried using a taser on him. He was still holding a knife, and after Officer Bluew repeatedly asked him to drop the knife, he then opened fire on him using his handgun. He was shot at least 5 times, resulting in his death. After the incident, the Clear Creek County Sheriff's Department issued a statement stating that Christian Glass was argumentative and uncooperative, and he was attempting to stab an officer with the knife he was holding. Details of his death weren't revealed until a few months later, when the body camera footage showing Glass making a heart with his hands towards the officers from inside his car just before he was shot was released. Officer Bluew was initially charged with second-degree murder and official misconduct. In his first trial in 2024, he was convicted of reckless endangerment, a misdemeanor, but the jury could not reach a verdict on more serious charges. A retrial in 2025 led to his conviction for criminally negligent homicide. During his trial, Christian's family all read their impact statements with tears, stating that they now live with anxiety because of the incident and will never be the same again. They stated that the killer shot Christian 5 times just to make sure that he was gone. After the family read their impact statement, Officer Bluew was asked to speak, and he expressed deep remorse, stating that Christian deserved better, and he was sorry for the event of that night. He pleaded that God should grant the bereaved family peace to endure the painful loss. He also expressed that he was willing to accept any punishment given to him. After his son's speech, Laura Bluew, Officer Bluew's mother, begged that the judge should have mercy on his son, stating that prison is a very dangerous place for police officers. However, the victim's family did not accept Officer Bluew's remorse speech, especially after watching the whole body cam footage and seeing how he intentionally shot their loved one. The judge emphasized that the incident was a misuse of power, not a mere mistake. On Monday, April 14, 2024, after much deliberation, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Following his indictment, Bluew was terminated from the sheriff's office. The Glass family reached a $19 million settlement with local authorities, which included dedicating a public park to Glass, a commitment to reform police responses to mental health crises. As of April 2025, Bluew has served about 2 months of his sentence, leaving him with approximately 2 years and 10 months to serve. He is currently serving his sentence in a Colorado state prison. Thank you guys for watching. Over the years, I've had some good experiences with the police, and I have also came across some police officers who left me traumatized. Have you had any good or bad experience with a local police officer? Kindly leave a comment below.